Yeah, we normally have something flash up. Okay.
You're now live.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you are by now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphone muted, except for when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment. There is always a risk that we may run into a technical problem, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment whilst the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers and public speakers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published on the Council's website. Members, I will begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your attendance. Please confirm your presence. Councillor Anna Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Ian Bates.
Present.
Councillor Simon Bywater.
Present.
Councillor Steve Criswell.
Present.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Present.
Councillor Derek Giles.
Present.
Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Present.
Councillor Roger Hickford.
Present.
Councillor Peter Hudson.
Present, Chair. Good morning.
Councillor David Jenkins.
Present.
Councillor Noel Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Elisa Machini.
Present.
Councillor Lucy Metzinger.
Present.
Councillor Tom Sanderson.
Present.
Councillor Josh Schumann.
Good morning, Chairman.
And myself, Councillor Steve Count. Good morning to all. As we have full attendance, there's no need to report any apologies for absence. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? I've not seen anything, so we should carry on with the meeting. I just wish to let the committee know that for some bizarre reason, I've just had a notification come up that my internet is unstable. I don't know why. I thought I'd resolved all issues. If I have a problem this end, please be patient. If not, Councillor Roger Hickford will have to take over. Councillor Josh Schumann.
Chairman, just to state that your picture keeps freezing, but we can hear you fine, I think. So I don't know if that's everybody's finding that, but you're occasionally frozen on the screen.
Let me try something. Just give me 10 seconds. I'm just trying swapping the input and we'll see how that runs. If you could let me know again. I've had no declarations of interest. 2 minutes of the meeting on 22nd December 2020. We're being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function of the right of your screen now? I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as correct record, so we will take that as carried. An updated action log has been included in the papers for the published papers for this meeting. All the actions are marked as complete. If any members have questions on the action log, would they use the raised hand function on the right of their screen now? Questions or petitions, So we will move to the next item of business.
Chairman, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but you are still going in and out a little bit. Well, especially on my one. So I don't know if everyone else. I'm seeing some
I've
dots
got the same
bound.
problem, Roger, and it's unsatisfactory.
Okay, thank you. Bear with me 1 second. I'll try another alternative.
Michelle, while Steve Count's doing that, I don't know if anybody else, but I haven't got a raise hand function on my screen.
It's changed places. I was about to ask if anybody noticed. There's been a Zoom update and it's changed places. It's now under reactions in the main sort of bit of your screen.
Strange, because mine's still in my participants list.
Okay, interesting.
In the participants list, if you go for more, I think is that, no, that's just like, isn't it? No, I can't. I haven't got it, but then I'm a co-host. Sorry about that.
It is under reactions. If you click the reaction,
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you.
Icon, and the hand is yellow and also shows in the picture of the grid of people as well against their picture.
Mine is exactly the same as Anna's. There's no change, so there's obviously some variance here. Okay.
I imagine it depends if you've updated yours to the new version.
Yeah, you might.
Obviously not Lucy.
Steve, do you want to try now?
I was going to say, can we see if is there any improvement, or please let me know if I'm freezing again.
Well, we can hear you, so that's good news.
Okay. All right. Agenda item number 4, which is performance report Q2 2020 to 21 for the financial year. Can I invite the Business Intelligence Manager, Andy Mailer, to introduce the report, please?
Good morning, everyone. So this is the Q2 performance report. So this covers performance up to the end of September 2020. The report itself gives an overview of performance across a number of key areas of business for the council. The report format has changed a little bit. We've included sort of summaries by sort of key outcome areas following member feedback with previous reports. First thing to note on the report is we're going to talk a lot about the sort of red and blue indicators. So just to help set the scene, red indicators are those indicators that are 10% or more away from the target, and blue indicators cover those where the target is being exceeded by more than 5%. Just turning to page 7 of the report, section 2, there are 93 indicators in total, which are mapped to the 4 priority outcome areas. There are also another 17 indicators which are used to measure the performance of the corporate services. A number of these indicators are annual, so they are so far unaffected by COVID, but a number of the indicators in here, and I think there's a theme that runs through this report, there are a number of indicators that are now being impacted by COVID, either because the services that we are delivering are being potentially suspended or impacted by our COVID response, or because the administrative processes around the collection of those indicators are being impacted by staff being redeployed to the COVID response. So I just wanted to sort of highlight that as a theme that runs through the report. If I turn to priority outcome 1, a good quality of life for everyone, we have 20 indicators as a basket that summarise performance in that area. We have 8 indicators are blue and 4 are red. We also have 3 indicators that have been formally suspended due to either the data collection being suspended nationally or because those services have been suspended as part of the COVID response. Overall in this area, I think performance is doing quite well. Overall, 11 of the 20 indicators are meeting or exceeding target. We have 4 indicators that are red, as I've said, and those are significantly impacted by our COVID response. If I turn to section 4 on page 10, detailing priority outcome 2, thriving places for people to live. We have 44 indicators in this area. 3 are reported to Adults Committee, 6 to the Commercial Investment Committee, and various others. So this is an area that is covered by most of the service committees. 6 of these are currently rated as blue and 7 as red. Again, many of those red indicators are due to the COVID response. Further details are in the report here. If I turn to page 13, detailing priority outcome 3, the best start for Cambridgeshire children. We have 29 indicators in this area, and 2 of those are rated as blue and 5 are red. And again, the red indicators, many of those are hit by our COVID response. And the last point I just wanted to make is that we are starting work on a set of indicators for outcome area 4, the net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So work is started with colleagues in the relevant directorates to develop some indicators around that area. The last sort of key section of the report, which will be on page 16, details summary of performance against the corporate services indicators. As I said before, there are 17 of those. 3 of those are rated as blue and 2 are red. And again, the 2 red ones are particularly impacted by redeployment of staff to the council's COVID response. There is obviously a lot more detail in the report, but I wasn't quite sure how much of that detail you'd like me to cover. So I thought maybe open this point for questions and I can address what's needed from here.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Andy. It's a good introduction. It is an important report for us to really get a handle on how the council is performing. Before I've got some thoughts myself, but before we get to that point, I'd like to ask members of the committee to raise their hand if they have any questions regarding this report. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a number of questions. The first one is on, well, there's 2 general questions and then a number of questions on particular indicators. The 2 general points I wanted to make were that there is a lot of attention given in this report to the blue indicators, which are more than 5% better than target. And a lot of attention given to the red indicators, which are more than 10% below target. But that's disproportionate, isn't it? If we were regarding 5% or more away from target, either good or bad, as being something worthy of note, then we should be looking also at the amber indicators, which are 5% or more off target, below target, with the same attention that we're giving to comparatively small performance variances which are above target or better than target, I should say. That doesn't seem to me to be giving due attention to some of those amber indicators and perhaps overplaying some of the blue indicators. And I'm wondering, therefore, whether we oughtn't to be equalizing that and only paying attention, for example, to blue indicators that are more than 10% better than target, or alternatively, bringing on stream those amber indicators for equal attention alongside some of those blue ones. My second point is that I haven't done the full analysis to see whether the blue indicators to which so much attention is paid are one-off blues, or indeed whether the reds are one-off reds, although I think those are less likely. But it seems to me that there are a number of indicators where whether they are blue or amber or red is can be a one period judgment on a trend which is the other way overall. And I wondered whether we should be paying attention to things that are consistently better or worse than target, rather than so much on the one-off figures. Those are the two general questions. I wanted then to go to some specific indicators. The first one is on page 25.
Councillor Gray, shall I ask Andy to answer those general ones first, and then we'll move on to the specifics? Okay.
You're the chair. Thank you.
Andy?
Okay, well, thank you. Good questions. If I cover the amber one first, I suppose something that we had anticipated with this, the mechanisms of this report, service committees see the full indicator set, and so some of the discussions around amber indicators we would sort of expect to take place in the service committee arena. The idea was that this would be a sort of a summary and overview for GPC. So if other members feel this is something that we should explore with the report for future iterations, that's definitely something we can look at. But the thinking behind this had been to kind of allow GPC to kind of get the overview of the areas that were doing very well or where we needed some improvement work. So that was the first point really around the amber indicators. And yes, you make a very good point that with some of the red and blue indicators, we may just hit that red in one particular quarter and then it improves. Equally, we may do very well in one quarter, the indicator turns blue, and then after that performance dips again. That's kind of, I guess that's just a feature of some of the indicators. Again, if this is a bit of an iterative process, so if members feel it would be helpful for us to include some more analysis in the report around which ones are sustained at a particular level or which ones are moving around, we certainly can improve the commentary and draw upon that. That's not a problem for future reference.
Okay, thank you very much, Andy. On the first one, the GPC is really the strategic committee, so therefore I suggest we continue the strategic role as you described it. As you said, the committees do have to a more in-depth to look at the ambers and the reds. But in terms of the second point, whether it's a trend or not, that information is contained in the graphics further on in the report. So if members have concerns about whether something is red, blue or orange, about whether it's a trend or not, the information is already encapsulated for them. And if that information raises any hackles, shall we say, on the back of their neck, that they should then progress it because the information is there in front of them. So I'll move on to the specifics now. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've already made my point about the general question and my view about the emphasis that's given, and I agree that there's more information in the individual charts, which I will come on to, but it's about the overall presentation at the beginning of the report and the way in which members' focus is steered. However, my first specific question is on page 25, and it relates to children re-referred to social care being, and it says there that this is being reviewed to ensure it's not an area of concern, bearing in mind the performance that's indicated in that chart. So my specific question on that was, how is that review taking place and who is involved in that? And will the outcome of that review come back to us as well as to the service committee? Do you want to go on with my other specific questions, Chair, or deal with them one?
I think Andy will take a few at a time. Okay, carry on.
Okay. My next question is on page 28, which is on children subject to child protection plans for the second or subsequent time. That's noted as blue, but the linear forecast is upward. It's an upward trend, higher than the England mean for longer than it's been below it in recent times, and trending to be higher than the statistical neighbour mean. So it's a very up and down indicator, but I'm wondering whether blue is an adequate, I realise it's an adequate representation of a very short period of time, and it's kind of the one that proves my point. And I wondered what was happening about that indicator, bearing in mind that it is on a linear upward trend, which is not good. My third question was on page 50, which says that work is being undertaken to fully understand the variations in the figures. And I wondered whether we could have a little more information about how that work is being done and what it is that's problematic about the figures. The explanation in the commentary is a little bit odd. It says there was a competitive procurement, a new provider, a new contract, substantial restructuring, and that had the predicted impact on performance, which suggests that we went through all that predicting that all that work would lead to a worse outcome. So I would be grateful for an explanation of the commentary there, as that does seem somewhat extraordinary. Those are my first three questions. Did you want to take those? And then I've got...
We can take those. The one thing I would say is, Councillor Spray, is we've had these papers for some time. Some of these are quite in depth. Andy may or may not have the answers in front of him, in which case we'll ask the answers to be circulated after the committee. Yeah. But when you have such in-depth ones as this, it might be useful to send them in before the committee, and then you could either have your concerns answered and they are no longer concerns, or there are things that you may wish to raise at the committee for all of us. So either option is available to you. But I'll ask Andy if he has any feedback on those in front of him today. Andy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the first two relate, I think, to children's services. We will need to seek some more information from colleagues in those areas, because yeah, these aren't things I'm that familiar with. So I will pick that up with the relevant.
Sorry, Chairman, sorry to interrupt, but Lou Williams is present in the meeting.
I think we'll go over to Lou on those two, if that's okay. Andy, just hold on there, and Lou, over to you.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Yes, so in relation to referrals and re-referrals, it's something actually that we keep under continuous review. So we look at that data all of the time. It's a somewhat complex indicator, not least because we've changed systems. So we moved to a new system called Liquid Logic about 15 months ago, and that reporting system is not quite settled yet. So it's about how things are counted. The other thing I would say about that particular indicator is that while it is red, it's not much higher actually than statistical neighbour or England averages. It's something that I want to see come down, but it's a very, very complex indicator because it depends, first of all, on how you treat an initial contact from a child. And if you've been treating too many as referrals in the first place, then it's more likely that you will have a higher re-referral rate. So it's quite a complex indicator. And I'm happy to go into more detail and give some more statistical detail about that if you would like, but it is quite involved. The one around child protection and re-registrations of child protection, what we have here is very, very small numbers, actually. So you have those big swings as a result of large percentage changes. You're right, the linear trajectory does look like it's going up at the moment. However, most recent performance has actually been showing a reduction. So I think that linear line can take some time to adjust. In overall terms, performance around child protection in Cambridge is actually an improving picture. We have fewer children on child protection plans for long periods of time than we have in the past. So I would say that's actually an area that I'm feeling quite confident about. But obviously that re-registration one is another one that we look at quite closely.
Thank you very much for that, Lou. Andy, was there anything in the non-children service on the...
Yeah, so the third one is a public health indicator. So I take your point around the commentary, but again, I'm going to need to talk to public health colleagues for a response to that one.
Okay. And we'll circulate the answer by email to the committee members. Thank you very much, Andy. Councillor Dupre, any further?
Yes, I've got one further set of three questions. Okay. Well, one is a comment actually, which is the page, where am I? Page 63. I think this is a new presentation of this indicator about statutory returns completed on time for Business Intelligence Service. And I just wanted to say I think that presentation really works, so that's good, thank you. My second one is the page 65, the proportion of citizens who feel well informed by the council. There's apparently, according to the commentary, going to be a new indicator. I wanted to know what that new indicator was intending to show differently, and who will decide what that new indicator is and what the target is going to be, where that decision will sit. And I also had the same question about indicator 187 on page 66. And my final question is on indicator 188, which is on page 67. And there has been no actual performance data there for the last 3 years. And I'm not sure whether that's because it's there were two sets of actual performance noted for 2016-17 and 2017-18, but nothing since. And I don't know whether that's some kind of indicator that's measured only every 5 years or something, in which case it's a bit awkward to have it come here regularly if it's not going to move for another couple of years or something, or what the explanation is for the missing data. However, it's quite an important indicator because it's about the satisfactoriness, if you like, of our web presence. It measures and makes recommendations on the performance of local authority websites across the United Kingdom. And bearing in mind that we are pushing so many of our interactions with residents online and onto our websites, not to have information that's reasonably current, and particularly when it's an amber indicator, is a bit unfortunate. And I wondered whether we could have more information about how often the data is collected, why there's not been anything since 2018, and what else we're doing and how we can measure the satisfactory or otherwise nature of our website interactions more effectively.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pay. On the first two, it's clear that an indicator where it's only measured every 2 or 3 years is of no use to us in monitoring through the GPC. So we really do need some new indicators there that we can look at regularly. So it's up to JMT to work with directors to come forward with suggestions. And what we'll do is we'll look at them through the lens of GPC. On the third one, Andy, not sure where we get this information from, how regular it is. Can you answer on that one, please?
Yeah, so this I think has been coming from colleagues in our comms directorate. But as you can see, we've struggled to get hold of information over the last couple of years. Otherwise, this information would have been populated. So I think this is another area where we have struggled a little bit to have, I guess, engagement from within my team to have the capacity to follow some of these things up, and for colleagues to be able to sort of get hold of the information regularly. If it's okay, can I take this as an action to follow up and try and pull something together for members?
Yeah, we'll wait and see what the answer is, Andy. It's unnecessary to assume that it's internal. It may be well that the data doesn't come out of central government in the same way or has changed. We'll wait until you answer and then we'll form opinions as to what to do next. Hopefully that's okay with you, Councillor Dupre, in which case...
That is, however, my first questions in that second set weren't answered about who was going to decide new indicators and when that was going to happen and what they were going to show differently.
So until they're developed, we don't know what they show differently. In terms of decision making on what the indicators are, Andy?
So as a process, we would normally seek approval from JMT initially, once we've worked up a proposal, and we would then use this forum to seek sort of formal approval to swap out indicators that we felt were no longer relevant, and then agree a process for reporting that from a particular point onwards. So we would want to work something up, bring it here for approval, and then start the reporting from that point forward.
Yeah, pretty much what I thought I said, but thank you for confirming that, Andy. Moving on then, next one is Councillor Lucy Netzinger.
Thank you. I just have two indicators I want to focus on, please, and these are indicators 39 and 41. These are indicators which are marked as blue, i.e. outperforming what our expectations are, and they're to do with road. It seems to me not a little surprising that the county is saying this.
Councillor Netzinger, sorry to cut across you. I've just realised, did you say the indicator numbers or the page numbers? Because I need the page numbers to follow you.
The indicator numbers are 39 and 41, and they are referred to on page 10 and 11, and the graphs for them are on pages 30 and 34. But I think probably pages 10 and 11 are the ones.
Thank you very much.
The report is saying that our roads maintenance across the county is better than we are expecting. That is not my feeling about the roads maintenance across the county. So my question really is this because the indicators are reflecting something which is not in fact the outcome on the ground? And that is quite possible given that this indicator report is for September, and since then the report from Skanska have come back with a lot of new money coming back to the council. So it may be that this indicator is not reflecting the actuality on the ground. It may be that it is reflecting the actuality on the ground and we are expecting our roads to be in the condition in which they are. In which case my question is really for the administration rather than about the indicator, in that, do we think that this is, are you happy with the state of our roads, and do you agree that this indicator should be blue? Because I do not think that, and if that is the case, then I think it would be useful for us to know.
Okay, Andy, can we have some explanation on this indicator, please?
Again, I'm afraid I would have to refer to colleagues in the relevant directorate for these ones. All I can say is that the target is set locally within the directorate. It's approved with the relevant service committees, and so that's kind of how those targets have been set. I think you may have picked up on a point there, Councillor, around the timeliness of these things. So this is reported up to the end of September. If there has been things that have taken place after that point, it wouldn't be reflected in these reports. But I'm afraid I would need to sort of follow these lines up specifically with colleagues in the directorate.
Yeah, I can see from the actual report, Andy, this is a national indicator that we're measuring performance against and not an internal one. But yeah, a full response will be useful for the committee. Thank you.
Steve, the second part of my question was for the administration, actually, about whether or not you agree with my concern that this indicator may not be fully reflecting our expectations for road maintenance in the county.
So as you're fully aware, Councillor Netzinger, the administration is not entirely happy with the road conditions across the county. In fact, for the last 3 years, we've proposed increases to the budget, which your party has voted against. We're indicating how much we are trying to do about it and how little you're willing to spend in that area. So yes, we are continuing to strive to improve the highways of this county, and that is reflected by the actions of this administration.
I think my question really is to do with the management of the contract rather than the on top of the amount going in terms of how much we were in.
You're confusing. You seem to be confusing what you were just asking me with the new line of questioning now, Councillor Netzinger. So we'll ask for a report to come back on this indicator, fully understand what it means. But as I said, it is a national indicator, and then we can have a further debate on the subject. Moving on, can I ask for Councillor David Jenkins, please?
Thank you, Steve. Just try and give some helpful comment, if I may, on indicator 32 on page 8. And the caption there is growth in cycling from a 2004-05 average baseline. Couple of issues here. One is the text in the paragraph there is a bit Morecambe-wise. All the right words, just in the wrong order. The 4246 cycle journeys in the last line but one were measured in 2004-05, not in 2019. So the target at the moment for this year is a 70% growth over a baseline set 15 years ago, which would be about 4% per year over the long term. But if you look at the graph on Appendix 1, you'll notice that we have
the page number, David.
Oh, it's
David,
page
you have
11
the page number?
of Appendix 1. We actually hit 70.
Sorry, David. Sorry, we want to follow you. So, do you have the agenda pack page number, please?
No, I haven't, because it takes me forever to wade through those. I've just got the appendix.
Chairman, it's page 29, I believe.
29. Thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you, Josh.
Okay, please continue.
We actually broke 70% in 2014. So we're giving ourselves a blue indicator for performance, which we'd already achieved 5 years ago. And that's one of the problems with indicators that are set and not scrutinized. We need to set ourselves ambitious targets based on recent performance, not go way back so we have something which perhaps accidentally makes us look good. So I'd suggest that this is an indicator which needs a serious look at, especially given the amount of money we keep pumping into new cycle tracks and the like. We'd like to see some improvement, and I'm sure we will see some improvement. So here's an indicator which needs a bit of work done on it, and the blue indication is misleading.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Jenkins. Some intelligent comments there, as usual. The point about, having scrutiny provides gets us to a place where we have decent outcomes. That's what you have just done. In fact, you've used scrutiny through the committee system. There is obviously, when you look back at 2014 and the progress since there, it presents a very different picture. So I'm going to ask that the committee that has involvement with that to take that away, to think about that some more, and then we shall look at it. I must say that the figures for 2020, it will provide some difficulties, obviously, because the impact of coronavirus has affected everything. So it may not be that we can draw too many conclusions from what is happening now, but certainly in terms of the scrutiny function of how we use these indicators, that is one that you've raised a good point about. We need to look into that further.
Chair, can I just interrupt slightly? I'm concerned at what you just said about intelligent scrutiny. If you're implying that neither Councillor Dupre nor I are giving intelligent scrutiny, I'd ask you to withdraw that, please. I think you need to be very careful about your comments.
Please, Councillor Netzinger, there was no intention like that whatsoever. This was just general commentary that I found that a very reasonable question. It seemed to have identified a fault. I was not inferring by calling Councillor Jenkins' commentary as intelligent, that in any way yours or Councillor Dupre's was less than intelligent. I think you've had some full answers to your questions. And in fact, I do recall Andy Mailer actually saying that was intelligent questions to Councillor Dupre. So, I think how can I put it? I think
that's fine. You don't need to say anything else. I'm glad to have been reassured.
Yeah, well, I'm running this meeting, Councillor Netzinger, not you. So if you'll let me finish, I do think you're overly concerned and overly sensitive on this area, but I can reconfirm I did not mean any insult to you or Councillor Dupre by saying that Councillor Jenkins' questions were intelligent. Is that satisfactory?
Moderately. It would have been better if you'd stopped before the final sentence.
Well, excuse me, as chair, if I have the last word, we're going to move on. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. I hope that's okay as the answers. Councillor Anna Bailey.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm sorry, this seems to have become so fractious. I just wanted to talk about some positives from the adult social care perspective, because naturally that's one of the most important areas of the council's work. Just to remind everybody that this performance reporting is focused on the period to September 2020, when we were and still are in the middle of a global pandemic, which has completely turned everything that the council does inside out and upside down. And I want to thank our frontline staff for the performance that they have delivered during that time, because it is nothing short of spectacular. And I'm so proud of the frontline staff in adult social care for the way that they've kept the show on the road and continue to focus on what the committee had and what as a council we have said are our important areas, and those are our performance indicators. Our adult social care indicators are at blue, which means we've gone beyond our targets and better than our targets. And generally, not all of them, but we are above statistical neighbours and average means. So I just want to say thank you to all of them. But I do just want to touch on the real life effect of this, because numbers really frankly don't really mean very much. What matters is outcomes for people, and that's what we're always focused on in the adults committee. So just to pick on a couple where we've been really focused on this work, indicator 105, which is on page 21, is about safeguarding, and this indicator is showing as blue. And we really have, over the last 2 or 3 years, changed our approach in safeguarding to, and some would say controversially, because we are carrying out less full-on section, whatever they are of the law, safeguarding inquiries. But what we are utterly focused on is what matters in terms of people's outcomes in improving their situation. And so that is why I'm incredibly pleased to see the performance in that performance indicator, because that is making a real difference to people's lives who are potentially in a perilous situation. Page 23 is indicator 162, which is our focus on carers. And again, some people could pick and say, well, we're spending less money on carers. I mean, actually, that's a byproduct. What we've actually done, yes, we've made savings, but the most important thing that we've done is we've focused on what matters to carers. And instead of giving them, generally, it's still available for people where it's going to make a difference, but instead of giving them a relatively minor direct payment of a couple of £100, we've really focused and given them time and support and human contact to talk about their situation and help them get plugged into other services and resolve their issues and help support them, help to give them respite from their caring duties, and just to listen as a human being. And it's made the most enormous difference to our carers. And I think the support that's gone in during the pandemic has been phenomenal through Adrian Chapman and the Hub and the team. It's been fantastic. So, our focus on carers, I do believe, is really paying off. Page 22 is indicator 140, which is about reablement. And whilst this one has gone down, the performance, we were at 91%, we're now at 83%. This is about people who who are going to a short-term reablement service and don't need ongoing service after that. We had a change of the computer system, so I think we're now on to a more realistic understanding of where we are in reality. But what that actually means for people is that people are independent. People don't actually want social care. Most people don't want someone coming into their home to have to help feed them and take them to the loo and all of that. People want to be independent if they possibly can, and that's why that performance indicator matters. And finally, just on the tech equipment, this is something we've focused on relentlessly in the Adults Positive Challenge programme. And Adults Positive Challenge, as we all know, has taken a knock through the pandemic. But even so, the tech work stream there on page 24, indicator 163, is still outperforming our target. And I think that's just fantastic. And again, tech means that people are independent, that carers have peace of mind. And it's those outcomes that matters, not really the numbers. They are just a way of measuring what we're doing. And I do think, and I do just want to remind that this is borne out by the recognition that Cambridgeshire County Council does get. in annual reporting, you'll remember the Empower report, where it doesn't rate 1 to 15, it just lumps the top 15 performing councils into a group of 15, and Cambridgeshire County Council is in that top 15 performing councils out of 149 councils with adult social care responsibilities. And what are they measuring? They're measuring promotion of independence, early support, outcomes for people, and cost. And those are all the things that are in our performance indicators, and they're all the things that we focused on relentlessly. And I just think to come, all that way through the pandemic that this is reporting on into September, and to still be continuing that performance is nothing short of phenomenal. And I just want to say an enormous thank you to our staff for making it happen.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey, and I echo your comments regarding our staff. I would say invaluable and intelligent comments, and I really do mean that they are, but please don't anybody else take that the wrong way. It is purely a comment in one direction only and not bilateral. I do want to say that in terms of these indicators, when we set out our stall and our budget in February of last year, which the financial year starts in April, if somebody said to me, you're going to lead an organisation that had a financial swing of £70 million, where staff were going to be self-isolating at home, you wouldn't be able to work from a lot of buildings, that the pandemic would present all new challenges across every single work area that you have. And they said to you, what do you think your indicators will look like in January of next year? And I would have probably said red across the board, but we'll try our best. But they're not red across the board. We haven't changed the indicators despite all of those challenges facing us. And I think, as you said, quite rightly, that's a real credit to our organisation, the way that they've been able to get through this and still have an organisation in good shape, or relatively good shape. So thank you very much. Councillor Noel Kavanagh.
Yeah, page 12, Steve. Indicators 180, 181, the FOIs, freedom of information. I'm not after a compliment about whether or not this is an intelligent question or not. It's just a question about the process. A short one, really, is it's clear that the performance is not reaching what is desired, but I was just wondering about the actual process, the management of all these FOIs that come in. Are the questions prioritized, by whoever's managing the questions? This is a central management to sort of discriminate between very urgent questions that require quick responses, and compared to, as we know, many questions that are submitted aren't necessarily urgent, and some actually, I think, are sent in what I would describe as enthusiastic users of the service. So the question is there a prioritizing, particularly in a time where staff have been redeployed and the expectations of meeting the target of answers being provided in 10 days or 20 days? So that's the question, really. Was that an intelligent one or what?
Well, you did ask me not to answer that, but yeah, it's been the focus of our attention before, our performance in this area. And I thought we had made some progress, but I'd like to ask the officers to respond on your questions on that one, please, Noel.
In terms of the FOI process, everything that comes in is managed in order. So the FOI team, as soon as they receive that, they will pass it on to the relevant officers for a response. In lots of cases, we are able to provide a quick response. My team is very heavily involved in most of the indicators that have a set of numbers attached to them. So as much as possible, we reply as quick as is possible. That there are obviously statutory deadlines within that that we try and work towards. In lots of cases within the council, there are questions that are coming in where officers are not available to respond. They have been redeployed into the hub to reply to provide our response and so on. And so it isn't always possible for FOI requests to be answered sometimes at all, but sometimes within a timescale. But the FOI team, they spend a lot of time working with those individual services to ensure that as much as is possible is provided within the timescale that that is sort of mandated to us. So performance has dropped a lot. I mean, you can see that, I think, very much in the performance figures. But yeah, it's from what I can see, it is managed as well as it can be with the officers available to us. I know that Ben Stevenson, I think, has provided some reports into JMT about this. If it would be helpful for me to get a formal response to that question, then
yeah,
I could say.
I think it'd be useful to get a response to the committee on that one, Andy. There are a number of points you've raised. One is the actual redeployment of staff during the pandemic, which may have a strong focus on this. I think the initial question, are these prioritised? The FOI team doesn't often have the answers. They have to go to the services for the answers. And because they don't know or innately understand what, how much angst or anxiety or the relevance of the questions, because they're not a service deliverer, they may not be able to prioritize that. Is really, once it hits the other end, they might recognize whether something is invaluable or not. So I think we do need to know a bit more about this, Andy. We need to know the capacity of the team, whether it's affected by the pandemic, whether once it hits the services there's some sort of prioritization, whether any particular services are faster than others or slower than others, and if there's any reasoning behind that. For example, they themselves may not be able to have access some information on occasions as easy as others. It is an area we've looked at before, and but judging by this indicator, it looks like it's one that we're going to have to look at again. So yeah, a response to the committee, please, Andy. Is that okay with you, Councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, there was just one thing about, is there a process for dealing with what one would call the persistent requesters for information? I mean, do people sort of stand out as abusing the service? And is there a way of legitimately dealing with them? That's all. That's another question.
Yeah, there is, Councillor Kavanagh. There is a very high bar set for what you might call a persistent complainer, and it's a very high bar indeed, because the last thing you want in an accountable body like ours is to somehow interfere and decide which answers you are or aren't going to answer. But there does exist in society those people that just will not accept answers, will take up officer time on a persistent basis to such an extent that they have to be managed, and in which case that protocol will be activated. But as I said, it's a very high bar before you designate somebody a persistent complainer. Okay, Councillor Machine.
Thank you, Chair. Hang on, my question is on indicator 43, which is under section 4.4. I'm very sorry, I can't read the page number. It's basically about the killed or seriously injured. And I just have a very brief question about, because it basically says, the indicator's red, and it says we've got, current performance is at 324 against a ceiling target of 251. However, it does go on to mention that we're seeing a drop because there's less traffic on the roads due to the pandemic, etc., etc. I was therefore wondering whether somebody had any kind of explanation for this, despite the fact that the, incidents are decreasing, we're still over target. And if there's anything standing out in the kind of incidents we're having during the pandemic, there are problems that we didn't know, something specific, because, I thought the first and second half of the description of that point were quite jarring between each other. So I was just wondering.
Okay, Councillor Machine, before I ask Officer, can you just reconfirm? I think you said 4.3.
Hang on a second. Yes, I said 4.4 and indicator 43.
All right. Okay. 4.4 is on page 11, and I'm just looking down. Yeah, page 12. It's the third one down. Not third one down. It's on the middle of page 12. Killed or seriously injured. Andy, do you have any response to Councillor Machini?
I would probably need to have a conversation with colleagues on this one. We do obviously get a lot of information that we summarise for this indicator. There's a lot of information around those individual accidents, particularly with particular interest in the KSI figures. That is scrutinised heavily by the road safety team, but I would need to get a kind of full response from those guys, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. I have no other hands indicating, so I'm just going to move on to one question of my own. That is on page 10, moving on to page 11. We have a number of indicators that are basically about narrowing the gap between Fenland roads and other parts of the county. So the reason the indicator was first introduced was because the roads in Fenland, because of the natural state of conditions of the subsoil, etc., meant that the roads were in a worse state than the rest of the county. And in trying to address the, shall we say, the areas of multiple deprivation, there was a motion brought forward that said, you know, that just because there are differences, we should try and close this gap. So targets were set, and I'm really happy to report that, you know, across the area, you know, these targets are sort of being met, or blue in some conditions, and being met. However, if the question is, if we're narrowing the gap between Fenland and other areas of the county, and we're now achieving those target figures, that means that we've kind of narrowed the gap from when we weren't achieving those figures to now. However, because there is still a gap target, what's going to happen to those targets in the future? Now, I appreciate that, you know, this was originally a Fenland area, and it may be that once we get down to those levels, it may be that we have to widen our thinking as to how do we narrow the gap between unsatisfactory roads and satisfactory roads, or it may be that these gaps are still sufficiently so geographically isolated that the focus remains there, and you just lower the target figures. But it's one for, I think it's just me at this point in time saying that the question should be raised, and offers the Highways Committee should be, Highways Transport Committee should be thinking about this, and whether how to move forward in a long-term plan for the future. Got Amanda, is that on this one? If not, I've got Councillor Ian Bates.
It was just a general comment on these performance indicators, Chair. If you wanted, I could leave it to the end if there are specific.
I'll ask Ian then, because I think it may be on this point. Yes, Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's been more than one or two comments related to highways and transport this morning, which I've listened to carefully. Thank you. And all I can actually reassure members is I will discuss this with the director, Steve Cox, and Andy. I'm sure you could join us on some of those conversations. So just to reassure members, I have listened, I have taken on board, and we'll discuss it with the director. And Andy, maybe you could organise something suitable, which includes, by the way, freedom of information, because we get quite a few freedom of information actually come to highways and transport, perhaps more than other areas. So happy to take away and discuss with director, which includes Fenland roads as well, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bates. Amanda.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to reiterate, Andy did say in his introduction, but I just wanted to reiterate that all of these performance indicators are closely scrutinised at service committees, so they will see a full range of the performance indicators that are pertinent to their committee. And each of those committees are supported by different members of Andy's team. So I think Andy's done a good job of trying to stay across all of these performance indicators across all of the committees. And actually in some of these areas, it's possible that chairs and members of those committees here are more briefed on some of these indicators than Andy would be. So I wonder if it would be useful in these future reports if we were to put in links to the minutes of those meetings where the conversations were had about these specific indicators, where they've been available, because some of the detail is contained in those service committees. And the other thing that would really help is something I think you mentioned earlier, Councillor Count, if there are specific questions on these leading into committee, it would be very useful to have those up front so that we can talk to the members of Andy's team and get the detail here to you on the day of the committee.
Good point, Amanda. Thank you very much. And as I said earlier, if people do have questions of detail, it's really useful to know these in advance, or even they may not be raised at committee once the answers are found. So thank you very much. I've got no other hands indicating, in which case I wish to move us on. So apart from questions of detail, there seemed to be a general consensus in support of the recommendation. If I've got that wrong, and if anyone disagrees, can they please use the raised hand function now? Okay, I see no objections, so we will take the recommendation as carried. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. I'm now going to move on to agenda item number 4, which is pages 77 to 102. The Integrated Finance Monitoring Report for the period ending 30th November 2020. Can I invite the Head of Finance, Tom Kelly, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. I'm conscious we've got a lot of financial business on the agenda today, so I'll try and be relatively quick in introducing this. Pages 78 and 79, first of all, they record that the forecast capital programme underspend for the year is 16.8 million. And the revenue position is now a forecast underspend of 0.7 million, a relatively stable position compared to the last report. And we reflect in some of the variations the operational impact of the pandemic, really, whether that's on spending on protective equipment, numbers of older people supported, and the level of NHS funding supporting that position as well. There's more detail about the impact of the pandemic on our finances on page 82. As the chairman referred to earlier, we are continuing to see an increased financial impact. It now exceeds 70 million, but the funding alongside that keeping pace at the moment, and indeed at this point we expect to earmark some of those funds into next year as the impact of the pandemic continues. Then a number of recommendations on page 77. A and B are revenue grants from government relating to different vulnerable groups. The council's already well underway with spending these funds, and this is the sign off for GPC's part. It's about support to clinically extremely vulnerable people and families and children for support with food and bills following the national government scheme. Recommendation C is a rebate from the highways contractor. This is a preset part of the contract with Skanska, that there is a year-end comparison between the individual billing for individual items and what the actual cost has been across the whole contract. I should emphasize, really, it doesn't imply any reduced delivery, just that the cost of that delivery has been less than if you accumulate each individual item. So it reflects that reconciliation process, and then proposes the reinvestment into further either highways related schemes or some of the targets we hold corporately around that kind of contract review. Delivery, just that the cost of that delivery has been less. I'm just getting a bit of feedback, I think, with there. And then finally, recommendations D and E are additional capital funding applied to the capital programme. One item from the GCP, and the other some good news about some funding we've been awarded in relation to the decarbonisation fund. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. I'm inviting members to ask questions of you in the report now, please. Councillor Lucy Netzinger.
Thank you. So I want to concentrate on the Skanska rebate for this bit. I'm very interested in what Tom's just said about the that doesn't imply non-delivery, because that was definitely not what I had heard. And I'm also very interested and very pleased to see that enhanced gully cleansing is on the list of what this money will now go towards that has been reimbursed to the council. I'm sure I'm not alone here in feeling extremely concerned about the way in which this Skanska contract is functioning and the way in which the highways of the county are being managed. I have heard a very, very large number of reports of cases where work has been reported as completed that has not been completed. And it's, I was obviously incorrectly assuming that this rebate was because of that work which had been reported as completed and has not been completed. I'm also very aware that there have been a number of places around the county where gully cleansing, or in fact the lack of gully cleansing, has caused major problems this winter, because where work on clearing drains was marked as having been done but was not done, there have since been floods that have flooded people's houses and caused really significant damage to both homes and businesses. So I am surprised at what you've just said, Tom, about this being about work that came in as less than it should have done or than was expected, rather than incompleted work. Are you really telling the committee that this hasn't happened? Because that's definitely not what I had heard. Presumably, my second question really is that this enhanced gully cleansing, presumably a lot of that will be going back to redo these places where it was reported as having been done, but it hasn't been done. So those are my questions.
Councillor Netting, before I ask for a response, you say you've received a large amount of reports of work that was claimed to be done that wasn't done, that you think we shouldn't pay for. Can you confirm that every single one of those has been passported onto officers or the chair of highways?
My understanding is that it has been discussed. I think Ian has been, I have heard the main place where I heard this had happened was in St Neots, where I believe that there have been a large number of investigations into gully cleansing, but it wasn't just St Neots. I think Councillor van der Ven has also been in contact with the highways agent teams about work in her area where work was supposed to have been done and hasn't been done.
I just want to make sure certain, because you're saying that you received large amounts of reports, and now we've moved into a hearsay area, and it'd be entirely appropriate that if you received reports of work being done, claimed to be done but paid for, which would be inappropriate, that you reported those. But now you've confirmed that these are actually second-hand reports from other people, and you are hoping that they reported it.
No, that's not the case, and I disagree with your report that this is hearsay. I know that Councillor van der Ven has been in contact with the highways team about work in her area where it was where the case had been closed, and in the case of St Neots, I have heard that from the Mayor of St Neots. If you would like to report that as hearsay, that's you're entitled to do that, but I do not think that is hearsay. I have not personally reported those cases because they are not in my area. There are a couple of cases in my area where work had been reported as having been done that subsequently needed chasing up, but they were minor in comparison with the things that I've heard from other areas.
Okay, so we're now confirmed. So you have received a large number of reports. You are aware of 2 other people who have received some reports and they've dealt with them, and you've received 2 reports yourself, which you have reported. I just wanted to get to the definition of the original statement, but I think we'll hear from officers.
So I think in the case, in one of those cases, Councillor Count, it was over 100 cases of where work had been closed that had been reported as done and was not done. So I'm happy to make sure that you get more information about that, if that would be helpful.
The point I'm trying to make is I really need to know that the officers were aware of this, and that was the drive of my question, because if they aren't made aware, they can hardly deal with it. And that was the original drive of my questions. Did you make the officers aware? And then you revealed that they weren't actually through you, they were from other people. But as long as the officers have got hold of them, we can look into them. Can I ask Tom to report back on the actual reasons for the refund, please?
Yeah, so there are, of course, a whole, it's a very large contract for the council, and I don't doubt for a second there are a number of contract monitoring issues across the piece that are an operational challenge. So I'll just confine my remarks really to how this rebate has arisen, and I can reconfirm that it is about the year-end reconciliation process between the actual costs of all of the works provided as they're billed individually and what that amounts to across the whole piece. my understanding is that the individual works as they go through, they're separate to kind of they're subject to a individual kind of certification and confirmation process by the contract manager in highways. So this rebate doesn't arise from any non-delivery of work. It's about the actual cost of delivering work the council agrees has been delivered. And for some added context, I think this is between 1 to 2% of the annual contract value, and it's a built-in and agreed part of the process that there is open book review, and that work continues.
Thank you for that, Tom. It's a good explanation about the open book process. Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just to follow up on the previous point, although actually I wanted to make another point. I do have a number of documented cases where highways cases have been closed, reported as done, and then not done. I have the officers, our local officers and local highway officers have been excellent, and they've responded to those and addressed those problems, and those have been principally in Whittlesford and in Ickleton, and I have the case numbers, and I can forward them to Jonathan or others. On Tom, I just had two questions. On page 86, on the COVID winter grant, I see there that there's 1.45 million funding, 50%, and then 2 tranches of 25. Do we think we will need the other 2 tranches? Is my question, because they will come in February and April. Certainly from what I've heard from local residents is that they will be required. So that's on page 86. And the other question I had briefly was on, this may come later, Chair, so please tell me if you want to take it later. On page, 1 second, on the relocation, the Alconbury relocation, there's a forecast underspend, and of course that was because of COVID and the building works not able to take place. My question really was, because of that phasing, would we still be able to meet all the timelines for Alconbury Weald, or are those building deadlines under pressure as a result?
Okay, thank you. Tom, on the first one, I think Mark may wish to input on the second.
Yes, so my understanding is that we will fully utilise all of that grant. Much of that winter support fund, I think, is geared particularly around supporting families in when children aren't at school, particularly in the school holidays. Of course, not many children aren't at school full stop at the moment, but yes, a lot of the funds have been invested in kind of voucher schemes that support that approach, and I think it's fully expected to continue through the additional instalments that we list in the paper.
Okay, thank you. And do we have an officer or whether Mark wants to come in on the delays to the Alconbury?
Sorry, Steve. Yeah, the Alconbury situation at this moment in time is literally, we've got 12 weeks behind because of deliveries, mainly around glass that was coming in. Otherwise, it looks like it's coming in under budget, and the quality levels for anybody that's been out there are quite phenomenal. I think actually it's a good situation. The 12 weeks has been well managed, and I'm still got some confidence that they will come in under the 12-week delay.
Okay, thank you. I saw a hand go up from Chris with Malian. Was it in response to this?
Yes, it was, Chairman. Just to add to the Chairman of C&I Committee's comments, as he rightly points out, there is a slight delay in the construction of Alconbury Weald as a result of supply chain issues. We are currently programming, or have a revised program date of going into the building at the end of August, beginning of September, after the fit out. So we're taking possession of the constructed building early or late spring, but there will be a fit out requirement. We're also trying to tie that in and align the decanting and decommissioning of Shire Hall, which is also as a consequence of COVID slightly slipped as well. So the two things are going hand in glove. But as the Chairman of the C&I Committee said, we are still within budget, even with allowing for the COVID costs associated with the new construction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mark. Just to add a note, that this, of course, is one small element of important element of the CAMS 2020 program, because this is us moving to a hub and spokes model to get closer to the communities rather than having one great big centralised hall. Thank you. Councillor Derek Giles. You're on mute, Derek.
Right. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, just to pick up on Lucy's point about enhanced gully cleansing. Interestingly, several facts have come to light. One is that reporting to the highway inspector for this area, unfortunately, he is off sick. So Councillor Bates is fully aware of the various concerns we've had in St Neots about the so-called lack of gully cleansing. And only in this meeting on my other computer, I checked on two of my favourite blocked gullies, which have got weeds growing out of them and causing flooding on the main road continually. And once again, these have been deleted and put as done, and they have not been carried out. They are still blocked. Now, we have a statutory right to maintain the highways, and part of the maintenance of the highways surely is the gully cleansing, which is now causing flooding. And I've put them once again back on the portal, and there's something drastically wrong here. We're asking members of the public to report highway faults. Highway faults are reported to have been done, but they haven't been done. So my question really is on this enhanced gully cleansing rebate, I presume it is, of £130,000, is what's enhanced gully cleansing? Perhaps Ian can help us on that one. But also I'll make the point that under a Freedom of Information request, it appears that the gullies in St Neots have not been cleaned for 5 years. Now, have we had the money back from that? Because there's something not right here, and I'm glad for the opportunity to bring it to members of this committee. I'd ask for a full investigation on this, and in fact, I've just emailed Ian out of the meeting to express my concern on this. But as I say, the question is, what is enhanced gully cleaning? £130,000. Well, that's nothing. And why are the gullies being told, or why are we being told that the gullies are being cleaned and they are not?
Okay, thank you. No, thank you for that, Derek. I'm disappointed to hear that these gullies, if they haven't been dealt with, have been taken off the system. So we'll get that looked into, and Ian will no doubt have a good look into that one. I understand on the enhanced gully cleaning, obviously we're aware of the flooding that took place. In certain circumstances, there's a lot of stuff been brought down by the water that needs extra actions post-flooding in order to deal with that. And I'm also aware that in certain situations, people are waiting on budgets to deal with more serious events, and therefore it's a good job that we're going to put some money in to deal with this. But this enhanced gully cleaning, that's really just to take us up to April. So it's quite an immediate effect that we're expecting this to be used on. And of course, the appropriate officers will prioritise that for the best use of that money. In terms of when St Neots did or didn't get done, it really does depend on the prioritisation process of wet spots of areas that work well. So areas that work well are not checked or dealt with in the same way that others aren't unless they're reported. So it is a prioritisation process, and we'll try and get your response on that as well. Okay. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chairman. One question on this report on page 94. The grant of £2.5 million from the public sector decarbonisation scheme. If I understand correctly what is being said, then what is being suggested is that that 2.5 million is not going to be treated as additional to the original scheme budget, but is merely going to reduce the authority's need to borrow to meet that budget. Can you confirm that my understanding is correct and explain what the reason is why we have decided not to regard that as additional and an opportunity to extend and increase the pace of our project on decarbonising public buildings? Because I'm considering suggesting an amendment to the recommendation to add that money to the overall budget rather than just use it to reduce borrowing.
I'd be surprised by that, Councillor Dupre, because this, of course, forms part of the additional budget that the Conservatives brought forward last year. I think it was 15 or 16 million pounds, which your group voted against. So why you would be asking to increase it now when you've been against this in the past, I'm surprised.
Chairman, a point of personal explanation, please.
Yes.
Point of personal explanation. This cannot be allowed to go on. In the Liberal Democrat budget last year, we put an amount in of an equivalent sum for decarbonisation and for work on the environment. So simply because we voted against the budget that you put forward, which included your sums, does not mean that we did not include those sums in our alternative budget, because we did. Because we did.
You cannot sit here and say that it was an equivalent sum. Your sum was nowhere near the 16 million pounds.
It was. It was.
What was the exact amount of your sum, please, Councillor Dupre?
I'm recalling that it was somewhere around this paper says 15 million in the fund, doesn't it? Yeah, and our sum was 15 million, as I recall.
We'll get that point checked out. Okay. Right, now, as I was saying, so apart from that point, the point about whether it's used to reduce borrowing or not is if you look at our entire budget process, whether it be a school or a highway, King's Dyke, or a new secondary school, we put in the full amount of what we expect to be spending on the project. And then we do our best to try and secure funding from elsewhere so we don't have to burden the Cambridgeshire County Council taxpayer with that money. I think it's a real credit to our officers that they managed to secure £2.5 million of outside funding when we were prepared to spend it ourselves. And that is a real credit. To introduce an additional £2.5 million now on with all the best intentions in the world, I've got no doubt about that, you'd have to actually show that we've actually got a profile that's capable of accelerating the programme. Now, I know from speaking to the chair and speaking to the team that the current programme, the pace of that programme is limited by various factors, including government legislation, changes in the cost of solar panels coming in from China, whether we are staying in or out of buildings according to the CAMS 2020 programme. So there are limits on how quickly we can spend the money. So I urge you, Councillor Dupre, you're quite welcome to put forward the recommendation, but at this present point in time, it's unfounded on actual reality. And what I would suggest is if you feel that way, you actually go and find out the information and put it forward as the a Liberal Democrat amendment to the budget in the February council meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. I will therefore not press that amendment at this point, but obviously we will need to consider it in the context of alternative budget proposals for the forthcoming budget debate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Josh Schumann.
Thank you, Chairman, and probably timely that I've found myself on the list at this point, just to respond, if I can, on that point that Councillor Dupre just raised.
You've just frozen, Josh. Councillor Schumann, I don't know if you can hear me. Can you try turning your video off? You've just frozen. Can I just ask any member of the committee to speak to me so I know it's not me that's frozen?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, Steve.
Josh has gone a bit. He's frozen.
Thank you. What I propose to do then, I have another speaker, Councillor Jenkins. So if I can ask Councillor Jenkins to step forward and could ask Democratic Services to contact Councillor Schumann and see if we can bring him back into the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Jenkins, David Jenkins.
Thank you, Steve. Page 94 again. The other item on that page about the 106 contributions for the Chisholm Trail. Just a little bit of clarification, if possible, please, Tom. When we're looking for these, well, seeking, as it says in the text, seeking these additional funds, Where are we going for them? Do we have an unallocated pot which we can simply dip into, or are we having to go outside and find a project that we can get some extra funding from? And of course, if that fails, I presume this is going to be a net drain on the council's finances.
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Tom, do you have a response to that?
I possibly don't have a full answer to that. I think and it may indeed be a question for GCP. My understanding is that they were approached for additional allocation from the funds that are subject to their decision making, and they have allocated it across to this project. So unless anyone else has further details, that is
correct, Jim.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. So hopefully that's. Yeah.
So we are getting this money from the GCP.
Yeah, it's Section 106 money that they control.
Okay, thank you. So it's cash neutral to the council.
Yes. Right. So do we have Councillor Josh Schumann back with us? Right. I did for 1 second there have him back. Have I not got him again?
I think he's just joined us back.
Yes.
Councillor Camp, sorry, Chairman, are you asking about my attendance?
Yes, I am. So you literally started, Councillor Schumann. The last words I heard were along the lines of, "This is an opportune moment for me to come in as chair of." I think we lost you at that point. So if you care to start again, it'd be grand.
Maybe some would say an opportune moment for my internet to obviously fail me, but I've now connected via my phone, so I'll try and keep a connection.
I'm sorry to say, it feels to me as we've just lost Councillor Schumann again.
Yeah.
That is unfortunate. Okay. Councillor Bailey.
I just wanted to provide the clarification that I believe the Liberal Democrat budget amendment in February last year on the climate change element was a transfer from the Transformation Fund of £10 million.
£10 million, so 2/3 of the Conservative proposal. So I think with that clarification, Councillor Dupre, I have no reason to doubt Anna Bailey. She's clearly looked it up. The amendment from the Liberal Democrats was 2/3 of the Conservative amount. It was voted against by the Liberal Democrats, and to suggest that today you would be doing something grand by accelerating it when your aspirations weren't that high in the first place is a bit difficult to accept. However, as I said, the best idea in moving forward, you've already accepted not to move an amendment today, would be to wait until the February budget, at which point you can reveal to the world your entire green agenda plans, which no doubt will exceed everybody else's for once this time, which it hasn't in the past. Councillor Netzinger.
Thank you, Councillor Count. I would like to make it very clear that when we were voting against the Conservative amendment and the Conservative budget, it was about a much broader range of issues than simply the environmental offer, as you very well know. I think this has been the second time in this meeting when your approach to a member of an opposition party has been somewhat less than respectful. And I would like to ask, please, that all members of the council are treated with equal respect, which hasn't necessarily been the case this morning. And I think it is particularly important when we're talking about things that happened over a year ago, and that you're speaking with respect to members of our group, and that you don't take, I mean, there's a huge problem in politics at the moment about misinformation and about the way in which politics has become increasingly divisive. Please could we make sure that we are not misusing votes in council on broad issues to attack individual members? I just think it's very unfair. Thank you.
So your points are noted, Councillor Netzinger. I must take exception. To say that £10 million is equivalent to £15 million is misinformation. I'm not getting into a debate with you over this.
Well, in that case, don't start debates on the budget. If you want to have debates on the budget, let's have a debate on the budget. What we voted against was the whole budget, not that element of it.
Councillor Netsinger, every time we raise what has actually happened, which is factually correct, you try and portray this as a personal attack by me on members of your group.
I very rarely do that, Councillor Count. This is the first thing I have ever raised this issue.
You accused me of a bullying attitude at the last meeting as well. And all I've done is simply raise the facts of what you, your group and your members have said. I've not used any misinformation. I didn't say that £10 million is equivalent to £15 million. I stated that our members was voted against by yours, which was correct. So I'm going to move on, and I do not accept that my behaviour has been anything other than informative to the public and actually presenting facts for the public to hear and listen to. It's not disrespectful. Denying the public the truth in the situation is disrespectful. Actually giving them information to hear how the debate is going is completely appropriate and transparent and good governance.
Well, I think
that's the end of it, Councillor Netsinger. I'd like to move on because I'm not accepting your complaint in this area.
Chairman, if I may, I believe Councillor Schuman's joined us again.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hickford. Councillor Josh Schuman.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll try this time off camera if that's okay, and see if that helped the bandwidth. It was just simply to say that Councillor Dupre's comments, you're correct. The medium-term financial strategy for the decarbonisation fund means that we don't need to allocate further funding. Again, I appear that everybody's frozen as I've started speaking.
Yeah, it was a 5-year plan last year, and it remains. There are 4 years left of that, and obviously February will give everybody an opportunity to look at the NTFS for the remaining 4 years or a new 5 years. Thank you. I've got no more hands indicating to speak, in which case I'm going to move to the vote. Bear with me, please, whilst I reload my chairman's briefing area. Okay. I'm going to take the recommendations on whole, and we have had various discussions, but I've not actually heard that anyone's objecting to any of these. So if I see no objections through a raised hand, I will take the recommendations as carried en bloc. So. Okay, I see no raised hands, so therefore I'll take that as unanimous. Thank you. Moving on then, agenda item number 6, which is the COVID-19 update report. As a matter of transparency and governance, I wish to read out the following. Given the rapidly changing situation and the need to provide the committee and the public with the most up-to-date information possible, I've accepted the COVID-19 update report as a late report on the following grounds. 1, reason for lateness, to allow the report to contain the most up-to-date information possible. And 2, reason for urgency, to enable the committee to be briefed on the current situation in relation to the Council's response to COVID-19. Could I ask the Chief Executive, Julian Beasley, would you introduce the report, please?
Chairman, thank you and good morning, members. I'm joined today by Dr. Liz Robin, who is going to cover off the epidemiology section of the report and the vaccine section, and also by Christine Birchall, who will be able to answer any of your questions that you may have in relation to the communications strategy that we've adopted in relation to COVID-19. I want to start, however, on paragraph number 6 about workforce, and just to give you an update on what is already set out in those paragraphs. You will see from those paragraphs that we've given a strong emphasis to the health and well-being of our staff, and we continue to identify assistance programs, training, and also the wellbeing hours to promote this, as well as a number of other resources to our staff. Our next wellbeing hour is going to be on sleep, and this has been by order of the staff who felt that this would be an important part to for those of them that may be struggling with sleep or maybe suffering from some sleep issues. So we're picking up, if you like, the vibe from the organisation, and we're playing that back in some of the programmes that we're offering them. It's also fair to say that since we've learnt about the new variant in relation to the COVID-19, we have reviewed all of our risk assessments and made sure that the staff who can work from home do work from home. But in addition to that, we've repeated and reviewed all the risk assessments of those who are office-based. And we've also taken some clear advice from colleagues in public health around masks that we should use. And we've procured new 3-ply masks for all staff that are in the work environment. And we paid particular attention to that. You'll also notice from paragraph 6.8, we've started something new in the organisation. And that's because our communication with staff as a senior team was through mainly vlogs, written messages, Friday Focus reports as well. And I felt as we came into the new year and with lockdown being imposed that we needed a more direct and perhaps more personal contact with our staff. And so we've set up what we call weekly COVID conversations. They're at 3:30 for our staff. Up to 350 staff can join at any one time. I lead them at the moment, and we basically brief them on epidemiology, on the vaccine program. And we have a theme that one of the other directors reports in. And this week we've got homeschooling. We know some of our staff are managing not only their work, but also they're dealing with children who are at home. And Jonathan Lewis has kindly agreed to come on and do something about homeschooling. So what we're doing, again, as I said, is responding to what staff are asking. We also use those COVID conversations at half an hour to get feedback, and it gives me an opportunity and other directors to understand how staff are feeling and what are the kind of day-to-day issues that they need us to help them with and address. And I think the last 2 that I've done have been enormously helpful and have been really well attended. So as you can see, a real emphasis on our workforce and supporting our workforce. And there's also a section on governance and reporting, and the reason we've done that is to provide you with the links to other committee reports about COVID, so that there is an ease of reference there, but also for the public, but also to set out in paragraph 7.1 detailed reporting on COVID-19 through the committee structure and through a range of other measures and places, so that members are kept up to date on the day-to-day work of the council on this very difficult pandemic. I'm going to turn to Liz now, who's going to update us on the current epidemiology and also in relation to the vaccine. And at the end, we'll be happy to take questions, Deb, and so I'll hand over to Liz.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. And COVID does move very quickly. So although the paper that you received is absolutely correct strategically on the COVID-19 picture in Cambridgeshire, even with the late publication, the figures have moved on. So I would like to, in that context of that very high peak that we saw late December, early January, now starting to fall, that strategic context being the same, I'd like to just give you the very latest figures, which are for the week going up to 20th of January. And also I will compare that week with the previous week going to the 13th of January. That'll give you the very latest picture of where we are in Cambridgeshire and its districts compared to national and regional picture. So the average weekly cases per 100,000 population, which is how we compare the rates of COVID in different areas. For England, those latest figures are 421 cases per 100,000, a fall of 20% over the previous week. And for the east of England, it's 438 cases per 100,000 and a similar fall of 22%. In Cambridgeshire, our latest figure is 308 cases per 100,000 population, and that's a fall of 11% on the previous week. That sort of shows the more general picture that we're getting, which is that we're still falling, but that fall is becoming slightly less rapid as we reach our lower rates. I can go through the individual district rates if the chair would like me to do that. I know people sometimes find it interesting, or would that be?
No, I think because we are the Strategic Council, I think the county-wide one is appropriate. However, if you could circulate those district ones to members of this committee after the meeting, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's a very helpful steer. Yes, so what we're seeing now is that we're still seeing the rates fall locally and nationally, which is good. But when we look at that in the overall context of COVID, the rates are still very high. So a rate of 308 cases per 100,000 is 10 times higher than the rate of around 30 cases per 100,000, which put Peterborough into the top 10 in the country back in July. So I think it's really important that just because we see a fall in rates, we don't somehow assume, and we're below the national average, we don't make any assumptions about being anywhere near normality. So that's really where we are. And in some of the individual districts, we are starting to see plateauing or even a slight rise week on week, which is usually dependent on local outbreaks and local factors that are happening. And it will be a bit bumpy as we watch continuing changes during lockdown. So in terms of hospitalizations, those are still high. Our NHS locally is still extremely busy as a result of pressure from COVID cases. And clearly we also have a regional role at Papworth and at Addenbrooke's. And in terms of the deaths that we're seeing, we are sadly seeing about nearly 9 deaths per day at the moment in Cambridgeshire of people who've had a positive COVID test in the past 28 days. So again, just as we are seeing nationally, there is an impact locally. And the best way that all of us can help to approach that is by rigorously following the stay-at-home rules and the lockdown rules that are in place. So I would just like to emphasise the importance of that in terms of our local epidemiology. Moving on to vaccination, if that's okay. The vaccination programme is progressing quickly in Cambridgeshire and in Peterborough, actually. We have had some publicity about less vaccination being done in the east of England, and I know that action's been taken on that. And you will have seen that despite the incredibly hard work that is going on, when vaccination statistics came out last week, I think it was last Thursday, on rates of vaccination in different NHS integrated care system areas around the country, Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and indeed Suffolk, were quite low in terms of the percentage of over 80-year-olds vaccinated. What I can reassure you is that there's been a huge amount of work over the past days and week to move that forward with our primary care networks opening up their vaccination programs. And many of you will be aware of this from your local areas, and also with that supply of vaccine coming in. So I expect to see a much more positive picture when the figures are published this week. So that's sort of a general background. More specifically on the role of the Director of Public Health, which is also the role of the local authority, I think there's some quite important direction of travel to share. So where we're very much seeing the Director of Public Health role being put forward is around the uptake of the vaccination. And that's what we as a council can do really well locally. We have very good links with many vulnerable communities and excluded communities. We have a very strong communications function. And as members, you know your communities really well. So what is on the way is the supply of data to directors of public health that we can analyse well, and that will be data that gives us as much information as possible about who is getting vaccinated and who isn't getting vaccinated in the eligible groups, so that we can then collate that data, share it with our communications team, with our communities and safeties team, with our district council colleagues, and just ensure that those population groups that we know from our public health experience are less likely to come forward for the vaccine and maybe vaccine hesitant, that we can communicate locally in the right way and ensure that we get really good equity in uptake of the vaccine through all our communities. So I think that the Director of Public Health is very much being given that role nationally, and we know that that data will be coming to us. So that's very positive. We'll work very closely with the NHS, which will continue to manage the vaccine programme through those NHS outlets, which they're doing very effectively at the moment. having that data will also enable the Director of Public Health to have an assurance role. So we will be looking at using that more generally to have those conversations around the system, make sure that any issues are unblocked, and generally just work together on the vaccination programme. But I think the key thing that we can do, which we've done with our approach to COVID infections by every day reviewing the local epidemiology and moving to our rapid response teams to act on that epidemiology. I think we can take that same sort of role with vaccinations, just being really on it and ensuring that we are reaching all our communities with those vaccination messages and ensuring the uptake. So I'll finish there. I don't know if Gillian wants to add anything on that.
No, Chairman, I think that's fine. That's good. Liz has covered that very well.
Okay, thank you very much, Liz and Gillian, for that update. Sad news. We've seen some good progress in some areas, but overall, it's just such a difficult thing we have to keep coping with. Everybody's coping with, and I really appreciate the way that everybody's stepping up to the mark. I'm going to open it up for more general debate and questions now. So, Councillor Peter MacDonald, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Liz and Gillian for the update. First of all, I acknowledge what Liz was saying, which is there's absolutely a huge amount of work going into the vaccination programme. Two quick questions, probably to Liz on this. We had some correspondence, Liz. The vaccination statistics are always a snapshot. We understand that on a weekly basis. So one can't take an individual week, but last week, I think we were the 4th lowest in the country in Cambridgeshire. So I'm really pleased to hear you saying a lot has been happening since then. And just anecdotally, as you probably know, so Granta practice, which is quite a large practice, covering 35,000 people in and around Sawston, Whittlesford in the area, they had no vaccine last week and they have no vaccine this week. And they'd engaged quite a number of volunteers to administer the vaccines, and at the moment they have nothing.
Thank you. I will certainly take that back and find out the position, because we know that vaccines come through from the centre, and I will just try to find out more for you on that position, because we are expecting vaccine to come through to our primary care networks. So I will find out more for you.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Lisa Machini.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. It's always very good to see how we're doing. I also want to ask a question about vaccination, because I've been going around trying to find information, and sometimes it's a bit difficult. And I was wondering, I've been through the minutes of Health Committee, but I've not quite found what I was looking for. And I don't know if it's because I didn't look properly or if it's somewhere else. I don't know where to look. But I think it would be useful for this committee to get a general overview of the state of the vaccination program in terms of the sites. Now, I understand that there are 3 sites where you can get a vaccination. One is the hospital, the other one is the GPs, and the third one is the mass vaccination sites, which we think we're going to have 2 in Cambridgeshire, one in Cambridge and one in Peterborough. And I can't find any recent update about where we are with those. And also, I think it would be nice to see a sort of general overview of, how these vaccination sites are popping up. If it's, if the spread is going, not the spread, what am I looking for? The granularity of where you can get a vaccine is increasing with time, and how that relates to supply, etc. Because I think it would reassure us to see that we are sort of with bumps and stuff, sort of going in the right direction rather than not having a clue. And I dare say that if I find it difficult to get this information online, perhaps other people do. So I think it would be nice if we had that sort of report. It doesn't have to be talked to at length, but sort of being available, it would be nice.
Thank you, Councillor Machini. I saw Councillor Peter Hudson raise his hands. I don't know if it was in response to this. He's chair of the Health Committee. Yeah. Peter, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that it was either yesterday or the day before, a complete list of areas for vaccination was issued by our comms, and it went to every single member. Every single member gets massive updates on everything about vaccinations via our communications department and our public health department. I've got a whole pile of them because I saved them all for the past week. It comes out on a daily basis. Yes, there's going to be one in Cambridge. I learned that yesterday through our comms team, and it's going to be in the Grafton Centre. I learned that yesterday through our communications team. The work our people are doing, it's absolutely enormous, and our comms are getting what they can out there. And also our Director of Public Health and our Public Health team, the massive, you can't even imagine the amount of work they're doing. I get briefings. I often talk to the Director of Public Health up to 10 o'clock at night, and everything is there through our communications. Every member is getting everything they should need, and therefore they can pass that on to their residents who they represent. You've only got to follow the County Council's Facebook page, where you can share everything about COVID-19 to the Facebook pages of your villages. I have about 10 Facebook pages altogether in my villages. And also, I also follow the CCG Facebook page, and they put out loads about vaccinations, loads of information about COVID-19, and I too share that. The information is there, it's easy to find, and it's there, and it's sent to everybody through our communications team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Peter Hudson. If I can ask a member of the communications team to make direct contact with Councillor Lisa Machini to see if there are any pieces of the information jigsaw that are missing. I'm totally aware of the ones that Councillor Hudson has mentioned, for example, listing every single site and the dates that they opened. So it might be that there are either some gaps in the information, or perhaps Councillor Machini hasn't recognised where we're supplying those pieces of information, and it'll be useful to match those two up. Is that okay with you, Councillor Machini?
Oh, thank you. Yes, but first of all, I absolutely do not. My question wasn't to say or to imply in any way that the comms team aren't working hard enough to disseminate it. Absolutely not. There is a lot of stuff out there, and it changes quite quickly. And what my suggestion was more with reference to these committee papers, to have a sort of summary and overview and sort of a strategic, as I was saying, overview, the fact that the centres are popping up, that there's more this week than last week, if there's bumps in the road, that sort of thing. I completely recognise, and I think it would be, as I said, I will talk to people offline and see if there's anything I am missing, I'm not following. But I am completely aware of the work that the comms team are doing, and I'm not in any way suggesting they're not disseminating enough. But thank you very much for that, very helpful.
That's fine, Councillor Machine. One of the things you've suggested, I'm also working with Amanda Askham at the moment, is to look at some kind of dashboard that we could provide as a strategic overview onto this. Obviously, the Health Committee has its specific roles, the community hubs through the Communities and Infrastructure Committee, but perhaps some kind of dashboard which picks up on some of these questions that do get asked. But as you say, if there's anything missing that between you and the comms teams, we'll get that identified. In the meantime, we'll look at whether there's some extra pieces of information. Well, I am actually at present looking at whether there's some extra pieces of information that'll be useful to look at through the GPC eyes, both internally. So, for example, one of the things I was thinking about was how many members of staff are self-isolating or unable to work, but also externally, just so it's visible. It might be the things that you're talking about, such as vaccination centres. We'll have a look into that, and that will come forward to the GPC soon. Councillor Dupre.
Firstly, thank you enormously to all of our officers and staff who have been working so hard on this. It's been absolutely relentless, and I just want to say thank you to them. Secondly, I have made no secret of my frustration at how long it has taken to get the vaccination programme up and running within some areas of Cambridgeshire, and I know that's absolutely nothing to do with council staff or council activity. It is an NHS programme. I want to make that point before there's any misunderstandings. And I make no apology for having been frustrated on behalf of my constituents who for a month saw neighbouring areas receiving the vaccine programme and us not. However, I am very pleased to be able to say that just over a week ago, the vaccine programme began here in my part of Cambridgeshire. And I just want to say, to amplify what I said before, that there have been huge numbers of really positive comments from my residents about how that programme has been rolled out practically on the ground in my division. So that really is very good news, and I'm really very pleased at how the NHS staff in my area have picked that up and run with it, and how well it's going and how efficiently they're managing the programme. My final point is about I hear very often from residents that we ought to prioritise vaccinating the teachers and then we can get the schools open. And I know the schools are running, I mean fully open, as I hope is clear. And I would be very grateful if Dr. Robin could say something about the prioritisation and also about the expectations we can make about life returning to normal as soon as we've been vaccinated, because my understanding is that that is very far from the case. And I would welcome Dr. Robin's comments about vaccines for teachers, schools, and particularly the relationship between the vaccine programme and the lifting of restrictions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dupre. Before I ask Liz Robin, the Director of Public Health, to come in on the question at the end, I just wanted to comment on the areas that, as you said, the rollout of the programme, which has nothing to do with us, and yeah, the programme's decided centrally, and the way that the hospitals and the PCNs and the mass vaccination centres were stood up were not part of our under our direct control. However, we are contributory to the success of the local rollout, particularly through the community hubs, organising lifts, car parking, and the arrangements at site. And we've played a huge role in that. And all credit to our officers. Once again, when we have been involved, we've done an exemplar job, and that's helped the smooth running. But obviously, as you say, quite rightly, we weren't involved in the decision making at the start. We've tried to assist where we can at every point that this county council is involved in. Liz Robin, would you like to comment on the JVI list and the local implementation of the government's plans?
Okay, so the vaccination programme is very clearly laid out nationally. This is not something which we're directing locally, it's directed nationally. And the decision on prioritisation has been taken by the Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisations. And they, looking at the prioritisation process that they've used, they have very much focused on the prevention of death and of very serious illness, so that the whole JCVI prioritisation criteria are about immunising those groups in the population who are most likely to become seriously ill and die first. So in a care home, vaccinating 20 people should save a life. That's a statistic that I've heard. And they're kind of working down the prioritisation very much in that way. With those people who care very directly, health and social care workers for very vulnerable people, they are a priority for vaccination, but that is in a sense on the hope and assumption that they may have a role, that the vaccine may help to prevent transmission. And so again, if it does, having those staff vaccinated will help prevent transmission to those most vulnerable. So that's very much how the first phase of the JCVI prioritisation criteria has been drawn up. That was the national decision. There is a phase 2 which is flagged, and I think that is very much more, from what I've seen, looking at key workers, occupational groups, and my understanding of the national position is that teachers are very much, I think, at the forefront of considerations for that phase 2, and that is, as I say, this is determined nationally, not locally, and that is my understanding of the national prioritisation. Moving on to the opening up, that I think is again a very political national question in some ways, but I think everyone recognises what high rates of COVID we have in the community across the country at the moment. So if you open up on the basis of a high rate, then you've got lots of people who are infectious, and you get very, very quick mushrooming of the numbers. So I think everyone appreciates that and understands that. Looking at the modelling going forward, and this is sort of my personal opinion, having looked at some of the literature rather than necessarily a sort of national line, but the impact of the extent to which the vaccination reduces transmission of COVID between people, as well as the extent to which it stops people becoming severely ill or dying, is likely to have a very big impact on that question. Because and we don't know that yet, that will be understood from information that we glean over the next few weeks. Because transmission was not the core outcome of the vaccination trials. The core outcome was whether people went to hospital or died, rather than whether they could transmit the virus or not. So we need to know more about that, and the vaccination program will have a more rapid impact on the overall COVID picture and the overall COVID pressures if it has a very strong impact on transmission, whereas if it has very little impact on transmission, and if you've been vaccinated, you can still carry COVID in your nose and throat and still transmit it to other people effectively, then it will take longer to get the really big impacts from the vaccination on the overall community rates. So that's some science that we're waiting for, and personally I think that is very key. And that has been in a published SAGE paper for those who are interested. But I think that is quite a key contribution to that rollout, that sort of future debate.
Thank you very much, Liz. I can only assume that holding pattern for the scientific evidence is probably leading to a holding pattern for the JCVI to come up with conclusions, and rightfully so. And we shall see as we get through this first immunisation priority lists, what decisions await us from central government on that, but very useful information. Thank you very much. I've got no other raised hands, in which case, apart from saying, your organisation, the entire organisation, Public Health and County Council, real credit to Cambridgeshire and well done to everybody. I'm going to move to the recommendations, which is to note the report. Unless I see a raised hand, I'll take that as unanimous. Okay, we've accepted that as unanimous. Before I move on to the next item of business, which is a substantial piece of business, the business plan, it's 12:01 now. I do think we need a comfort break. If I could ask everybody to be back by, I'm loath to be a whole 10 minutes, but let's say 8 minutes past. Go for 6 minutes, shall we? 8 minutes past, if we could have a comfort break and then return. Thank you. It's 12:08, so I'm hoping the others will turn their cameras back on. Here we go, populating now. In which case I shall reopen the meeting. Just a couple left to come in, but I'm going to reopen the meeting now. So, Michelle, is it okay to go ahead? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm reopening the meeting. Apologies, it can be a longer break, but I know that we've got a bit of work left to get through before the end of the meeting. So I'm going to move on to agenda item number 7, Business Plan 2021 to 22 and 25 through to 25 to 26. Can I invite the Chief Finance Officer, Chris Mullion, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. And I'll start by echoing quite a few comments that have been made this morning regarding the challenges of operating business as usual and a worldwide pandemic, managing that as in terms of the operations of the council, and at the same time having to produce a business plan and a set of budget papers against the backcloth of ever-changing environment. So I would like to start by thanking the organisation as a whole in terms of their contribution in order to get us to the position that we're at today. And if I may, Chairman, if you could just indulge me slightly, as you will know, and as the committee will know, this is my final budget set of papers that I'm presenting to the committee. And I think it would be remiss of me if I didn't offer my own personal thanks to the finance team and Tom Kelly in particular for the work and support he's provided to me over the years, and particularly in relation to developing the business plan and papers that you have in front of you today. So thank you for that slight indulgence. Members of the committee will obviously be aware that this is the penultimate stage of what has been a very long process. We've seen a significant number of changes to the forecast that we are projecting, both in terms of the cost of managing the worldwide pandemic and the implications thereafter, but also in terms of the funding that we're receiving from central government. So it has been a business plan construction like no other that we have seen. The papers in front of you today are very lengthy, and I'm sure you've all had the opportunity for reading them in depth, but the focus generally happens to be, naturally I suppose, on balancing next year's budget, but I do need to remind members of the context of which the financial papers which you're considering are set. And the Appendix 2 in particular sets out a number of key documents upon which the resources that we have at our disposal have been allocated, and they are the strategic framework, the medium-term financial strategy, obviously there's the detailed financial tables, and the business cases that support those tables. There's also the budget consultation paper, a capital strategy, and a treasury management strategy. An awful lot of paperwork, but as I say, we don't necessarily just want to focus on the budget gap, which obviously is going to be quite a lot of the focus this afternoon. As we've mentioned to the committee in previous papers, it's an ever-evolving process, and particularly more so this year than ever before. I think it's fair to say that we've made assumptions for the next financial year based on the best information we have at our disposal at this point in time, but there is a significant amount of uncertainty still left in the system. There are, for instance, 10 million people nationally who are furloughed. We do not know what the long-term impact on the economy is going to be as we come out of COVID. So there are a significant amount of uncertainties left in the planning forecast that you are considering this morning. And some of that that ever-changing environment is articulated in a simple snapshot of the movement between what we presented to committee in December and the data that we're actually presenting to the committee today. So we have moved quite significantly, both positively and negatively, in terms of the costs that we're likely to incur, or we're projecting to incur, from the £21 million that the committee considered at the December meeting. And the report does highlight the options available to the council in terms of the new target or the new gap which is £9.6 million as set out in the report. The report highlights the opportunities available to the council to balancing that budget. There was a time during the early part of the construction of this business plan that we weren't even sure that we would be able to present a set of proposals to the committee for their consideration that would be able to balance next year's budget if the pandemic and the funding from central government weren't manageable. So we are in a much better position than we perhaps feared in the autumn of last year. I will take the opportunity, Chairman, I know I don't need to say this, but it is a statutory responsibility for the council to set a balanced budget for the following financial year. Obviously, the medium-term financial strategy looks at the medium-term resources available to the council, and the tendency is to focus on balancing next year's budget, but we do need to look at the implications on the resources of the council over the medium term, not just in 21-22. And that sort of is epitomised by the fact that when we sat here, well, obviously sat in the KV room last year, we were projecting a budget deficit at that point for this year of £4.2 million, and how that has changed in that scenario. The projections that we've got in front of the committee today are significantly worse than that for 22-23, based on the impact of COVID, or coming out of COVID. There is a spending review later in this year, and what we obviously will, as an organisation, be making our position known to the government around the fairer funding, and we will be seeking in order to, an approach in order to maximise the level of resources coming out of that spending review for the Cambridge residents. But I don't think we should underestimate the challenge of what lies beyond the next financial year. In paragraph 4.1, which is set out in page 112 to 114, we have identified the options available to the council around balancing next year's budget, which obviously do focus naturally on the council tax, be that core council tax, or the flexibilities around the adult social care precept. In addition, the council can consider the use of the MRP adjustment and transformation fund funding. As a last option, we've highlighted that the council could consider reducing service levels. I do need to remind, again, I know that I don't need to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway, that any balancing of next year's budget, which is not supported by additional revenue or reductions in expenditure, will automatically knock on to the consequences for the 22-23 financial year. And I think that's probably all I wanted to say by way of introduction, Chairman. Clearly, there's an awful lot of paperwork in front of the committee, but I'm happy, and Tom and I will be happy to try and answer any of the questions that the committee have. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. Before I move on to the committee more generally, I'd just like to say to inform the public that this is a substantial document, but it isn't something that's been written up purely for this committee, and it's our first chance to see it. It's been developed over the year, been through various different iterations and committees, so it's not entirely new to every member here. There has been a lot of activity on that, and a lot of it's seen, but it's appropriate we put it into one final format as it's heading towards full council. So please don't be surprised by the sheer size and quantity of the paperwork involved. It's not a single committee issue. In terms of the committee, I'd just like to remind you the time constraints and the fact that the full budget will be debated at full council, when all the press, the media, the public will be much more finely focused on our attentions on that day, when our differences become more clear between the various groups. So if we can stick to the general paper and the details of this paper, I'd appreciate it today, and leave those more vexing questions for the full council debate. Councillor Tom Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and just to reiterate how much you'll be missed, Chris. It's been a pleasure working with you. I haven't really done much with the budget, but wish you very well for your sort of future ambitions. So, Chairman, mindful of the time, just a couple of comments. I'm really looking at 4.3 for the sort of main report, the summary of the report. There's a table just below that sort of seems to imply that there's only £400,000 less of unidentified savings at a 4.99% council tax increase than at a 2% increase, and that's in the year 25-26. Looking at the impact on our budget provision, I just wanted to get a little bit of clarification on that. At the moment, my understanding is that we're only allowed a 1.99% increase on the precept without having to call a referendum. Is that still the case now? Do we have any idea whether that will change? I imagine that's quite a difficult thing to predict at the moment, but they're my two questions there. Thank you.
Chairman, through you, can I respond to those questions? The table on page 112, which is the first one that Councillor Sanderson referred to, I mean, it is slightly misleading, but the reason why there's only a minor changes between the various council tax increases in future years is the compounding impact of the changes in year one, i.e. 21-22. What it doesn't do in that table, and for argument's sake, there is let's say there is a 3% increase in the council tax, so 21-22 would leave an unfunded balance of 6,546,000. That still needs to be addressed. So if it's addressed through reductions in service levels, or it's addressed through additional income, then that is dealt with. If the council decided to fund that £6,546,000 from reserves, either transformation fund or the general reserve, that deficit or that sum would automatically be added to the 17,444,000 in the next column. So in terms of that table, it makes an assumption that whatever council tax level is determined, the balance of that is met by ongoing savings or increases in income. Hence the reason why the changes in future years only refer to the compounding impact of the council tax increase in year one. So apologies if that's not as straightforward a presentation as it might have been. In relation to the question Councillor Sanderson raised about the council tax levels, we have been notified in the spending review, which happened in early December, that the council tax regulations for next year will be, as Councillor Sanderson suggested, a 1.99% base council tax trigger point for a referendum, but that there would be the ability to raise an adult social care precept of up to 3%, and therefore hence the reason why this table shows a maximum council tax increase of 4.99%. And whilst I'm referring to that matter, Chairman, it might be worth reminding the committee that the adult social care precept, which is a maximum of 3%, can be taken at any point over 21-22 or 22-23 financial years.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Thank you, Chris. And Chris, apart from the thanks myself, obviously, as chair of the committee, I just want to get confirmation you are still supporting us at the full council meeting.
That is correct, Chairman, yes.
Yeah, so we could go through undying thanks from everybody this morning, and they certainly do come from me, or if not, we can do some of that at the full council, but thank you. Councillor Lucen-Singer.
Thank you. So I'll be very brief with my thanks for many years to Chris and for the last couple of years to Tom. They have done an amazing job over a number of years, but also particularly this year where the COVID situation has made any kind of financial planning incredibly difficult. However, we do have limited time, and I'm going to focus very much on the area of this paper that Tom Sanderson was also focusing on, i.e. pages 111 and 112, where we concentrate on the unfunded gap for the council and the council tax assumptions. I think it is incredibly important that we note as a whole council the impact that not having taken council tax rises over the past 5 or 6 years has had on this council's income. that if we had raised council tax at the same levels as neighbouring councils would have done, this council would have an additional £15 million every year to spend on our regular services. That would make an enormous difference to the level of service that we can offer to the most vulnerable of our residents. It would make an enormous difference to the services that we can offer in terms of our roads network, in terms of our gully cleansing, all the things that we've been talking about already today, but most importantly of all, to our most vulnerable residents. I think that during this COVID period, the lack of support for ordinary families out there trying to cope with homeschooling, with all kinds of, I mean, Councillor Dupre is speaking later, that the lack of support for some parents who are looking after disabled children at home is astonishing. And I think we need to make sure that after this pandemic is over, we are rebuilding our services to make sure that we are doing things better for the people of Cambridgeshire, because actually the cuts have been too hard and too heavy. We may not want to build them back exactly as they were in the past, but my goodness, there is a need for rebuilding universal services in our communities, and we really need to focus on that. Looking at those council tax rises, the difference for a Band D household between a 2% and a 4% rise is 52 pence a week. And that's for a household. If you are a single person, you get a single person reduction. So if you are a single person household, it is 26 pence a week. Now, those numbers for an ordinary household are not going to make a huge difference to their annual budget, but they do make a huge difference to the services that we can offer the people in Cambridgeshire. So I'm not going to talk at length about the detail, because that will come in our budget amendments in a couple of weeks' time. But this is an opportunity for me to try and speak to the Conservative group. Please look at those figures, look at what the damage that has been done to this council for not taking that money over the past few years. One of the key points in this document is at the bottom of page 111, it talks about, from a financial perspective, taking the council tax is the most advantageous approach as it generates ongoing revenue on a sustainable basis. Maximising tax revenue also places the council in a better position with regarding to challenging central government in respect of adopting a fairer funding distribution methodology. Please, can I draw the attention of the Conservative group to those comments in this paper? It really matters to this county that we don't continue to underfund our services as we have done in the past. There's lots more to say. I'll say it all on the 9th of February. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Metzinger. Just before I move on to Councillor Dupre, I won't go into lengthy speech, but you didn't follow up your reference on page 11 with 111 with the next paragraph. Clearly, however, the disbenefit of this option is the increased burden on Cambridgeshire households through higher tax bills. So for those that have got papers in front of them, I suggest that for a balanced decision, you read both paragraphs together. Councillor Dupre.
Thank you. I thought Councillor Meschini was ahead of me, but this is your meeting, you're in charge. So
you are correct. Sorry, there's a confusion on my part due to pictures as opposed to hands. If I could ask you to hold back, please, Councillor Dupre. You are correct. Councillor
It's all right. I didn't mind either way. I'm going to be really very quick. I will not go into the council tax debate because I think that will be for a couple of weeks' time. I want to say, well, first of all, my group and I absolutely appreciate the incredibly difficult balancing act that we're going to have to do, and we do not underestimate in any way at all the difficulty that we face ourselves in, and we may or may not in 2 weeks' time go into the causes of that, why that might have been. But it is incredibly important also to underline the incredible dependence that we are going to find ourselves in next year on continued government handouts that have contributed to decreasing our budget deficit this year, one-off COVID grants, etc., which have, as Chris has outlined, because of the way that the budgeting system works, I'm kind of learning it myself right now. It's quite counterintuitive at times, but getting one-off grants from government will increase your dependence on similar one-off grants the following year and the year after that. And I don't think, I mean, having observed the budgeting process in the previous 3 years, I have never seen projected figures in the following years quite as high as these, and this is obviously quite worrying, regardless of whether we add more to it or not. It's already quite bad as it is. So this is something we'll have to worry about. Please may I just thank Chris and Tom very much for the work they've done over this budgeting period, and Chris in particular, there are no words for how much I miss you. I will miss you, as it were, sorry. I don't miss you yet, but I'm sure I will do. And thank you very, very much for everything you've done.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nashini. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. And just to inform everybody, to the best of my knowledge, Tom isn't going anywhere. So I hope not anyway. With no disrespect to anybody else, a very astute point you raised about the nature of the one-off funding, which I just want to comment on. So for example, there was 11.96 million or thereabouts, one of the one-off COVID funding, which because it isn't, so it reduced the gap for the coming year, but because it isn't repeated, it comes out, you know, we have to find that ongoing revenue the years after. So the system to date that the government has used is every 3 months we do data returns, same as the whole country does, for COVID spending. And they've been trying to balance the book in reverse. So after you've spent it, after the figures become known, they've used various different formulas to balance it. And we have made representations to the government and said that that's worked, and thank you very much for seeing us through this coronavirus crisis this year. However, when it comes to budget setting, we have to work on the principle of we can only put in what we know we're going to get. I do hope that if there are further financial impacts in the coming years, that they are recognised in reverse by government, but we cannot put forward a budget on that basis. So you're absolutely right that the one-off funding, it would be more useful if we had some regular recognition of the advance demands of the coronavirus impacts. And I think at some point in time when it's really truly understood, and it won't be for a while yet, that there might be some adjustments for that, but we cannot budget for that. So thank you very much, Councillor Machini. Councillor Lorna Dupre, again, my apologies for earlier, you were right.
Right. Missing you already, Chris, as everyone has said. I'm not going to speak about the numbers. There's no point about speaking about the numbers really in this budget papers today, because as 10.1 says on page 120, this is the last opportunity for the committee to publicly scrutinise the business plan. And it's all the more shocking, therefore, that in fact we have got today, as we have had for the 2 previous years, a pretend budget to scrutinise, which means that there will be no public scrutiny of the administration's budget until the actual council meeting. I mentioned at the last meeting that the strategic framework and particularly the section on a well-connected, safe, clean, green environment did include no reference to public transport. I'm pleased that this has been shoehorned into that particular paragraph there this time, so that on page 149, this now talks about providing choice for residents to travel by road, rail, public transport, cycle, or on foot. And I very much hope that eventually public transport becomes a realistic choice for many people in our county. On page 159, there is a list of factors impacting medium-term GDP growth, and I was surprised not to see Brexit included among that, because it is clearly a factor affecting the current and future growth of our economy. And I just want to refer onwards to page 163, where there is reference to Brexit, which covers 2 potential impacts. Firstly, the availability of the workforce from EU countries, and secondly, the issue of trade tariffs. Now, it seems to me that that significantly underplays the risk of Brexit to our economy. We have seen in recent days reports that government advisors are now advising companies, including at least one business in this county, to move their operations and jobs to EU countries in order to get round the red tape, or should I say blue tape, that Brexit has introduced for so many businesses. That is the reality of what Brexit is doing to our economy. It's not just about the EU workforce or about tariffs, important those two issues are. It is about the persistent and future undermining of businesses and jobs in our region, which will have a profound effect, I believe, on the economy of Cambridgeshire for many, many years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Dupre, and thank you for the mentions about the public transport, which you rightfully highlighted needed to be in the strategy document. And I think it just bears to light that the scrutiny function that you seem to claim is missing today, but is fully available at full council, has worked very well in getting these documents knocked into good shape so that full council can have a proper debate on the subject. I've got no other hands, so I'll just close with a couple of comments. There was a comment earlier on that, of course, if we raised council tax, we'd have £15 million more, or £50 million more to spend today, whereas all the proposals to increase council tax to the full amount have always had spending plans right alongside them. So there would not be that flexibility to be made. It would simply be a matter of fact that we would be raising more and spending more, and there would be no greater flexibility unless you wish to cut some of the extra expenditure. But we shall leave all the council tax debates for full council, where I'm sure they will be aired at much greater length and clearly show the differences between the outlooks of the various parties and how they believe things should be managed in the medium term. So with that, I'm going to move to the recommendations. I do think that the officers have done a very good job in presenting us with their best set of figures in enabling us to plan for the future. And I would add a caveat of my own that is in the report, that there are no certainties. So whilst we are setting out a budget for next year, and we will do it full council, I think the likelihood of variances moving forwards until coronavirus has been fully understood will be quite large. So we might see some choppy waters ahead. Hence, there is a section in the report about perhaps using some of the monies, holding that centrally as reserve, and what that might look like as we move forward. So I haven't heard any objections to the actual recommendations, so I'm going to assume that we take everything on block and move forward on that basis. So unless I see any hands, I'm going to assume that we've agreed all recommendations on block. I've not seen any hands raised, so we'll take that as unanimous. Thank you very much. And we shall finalise the full budget at full council. I'm going to move on now to agenda item number 8, pages 517 to 542. This is the development of an asset-based approach to commissioning and delivery and the papers associated with that. Can I invite the Service Director Commissioning, Will Patton, to introduce the report, please?
Good morning, Chair. Jo Melvin here. I'm delivering this presentation in place of Will today.
Thank you, Jo.
Okay, thanks. So committee is requested to approve £268,000 worth of transition funding to set up and test a new model of commissioning called the asset-based area. This model of commissioning has been developed over recent months in collaboration with our operational colleagues in adult social care and our Think Communities Directorate as well, to help manage demand for adult social care and contribute to the outcomes of the Adults Positive Challenge programme. Excuse me. By blending a Think Communities approach with place-based and outcome-focused commissioning, the asset-based area will create a vibrant and sustainable model of community-based care and support. And that's with two strategic aims. The first is to delay demand for adult social care, for long-term adult social care, by enabling more people to remain living happily at home for longer. And in doing so, the second aim, which is to improve the outcomes and the experiences of adults in the community who have care and support needs. Implementing the asset-based area approach is going to require significant transformation in the commissioning relationships and practices and processes that we have both internally and between partners, providers, and local communities. New flexible commissioning and contracting practices will need to be developed that will promote innovation, co-production, social enterprise, and greater entrepreneurship. And we need to make it easier for communities to be able to establish grassroots mutual aid and informal care and support. We propose to test the asset-based area commissioning approach through a single early adopter site, and if evaluated successfully, to roll that out across in subsequent phases across the rest of the county. The business case, which you've obviously read, is requesting £268,000 to fund dedicated commissioner capacity and an independent evaluation. And this equates to less than 0.5% of the council's annual spend on home care and supported living. As we've set out in the paper, the asset-based area has significant return on investment potential in terms of both demand management, cost avoidance, and social impact. The difficulty is being able to detail and evidence that in advance of undertaking the work, because the social return on investment in social care is so under-researched nationally. All of the research is very much dominated by return for health systems rather than our social care or local government. So what we've outlined in the paper is the significant potential we've identified, and that basically centres around the creation of new capacity in the community to support the increased growth in demand for adult social care over the next 15 years. We know that by 2036, there'll be a 110% increase in the number of over 85s and a roughly 50% increase in the number of over 65s. And our market trends analysis is showing us that the majority of those people are going to want to try to stay living at home or in housing with care in their community. So in order to be able to support that, it's really important that we create additional capacity, which crucially is based on affordable alternative models to the kinds of care and support we deliver at the moment. There'll also be a cost avoidance impact, hopefully, from delaying demand for our long-term bed-based care. We know that the average home care package costs a quarter of an average residential bed-based care. So the more that we can support people to remain living well at home for longer, obviously, the better that is for everybody. And it will help to divert demand into more expensive bed-based care, such as short stay beds, because we don't have enough sufficient provision in the community to be able to support those people to remain at home. We also anticipate it will contribute to a reduction in demand funding in the medium-term financial plan and improve the efficiency and value for money of our currently commissioned provision as we work more closely with our partner agencies to reduce duplication. In terms of social return on investment, it will really give us the opportunity to harness the potential communities have in supporting vulnerable residents. And that's been really apparent during the COVID pandemic in terms of the really phenomenal response that the voluntary and community sector have had in supporting their local communities. It will also make services far more flexible, diverse and holistic to be able to provide a better level of service to meet individual needs in the community. And ultimately, our intention is to improve the outcomes and the quality of life for those older people and adults who choose to remain living at home. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe, for a very comprehensive, excellent introduction. I'm going to invite members of the committee to now raise their hand should they, oh no, please excuse me, because I think I'd like to invite Councillor Bill Hunt to speak. Under the Council's constitution, Bill, you are entitled to 5 minutes, which will be timed by the Democratic Services Manager. At the conclusion, I will invite members, if they wish to ask any questions, in relation to Councillor Bill Hunt's presentation. But these should be limited to questions of clarification only. Following that, I will open up the item to general debate. So, Councillor Bill Hunt, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am, Chair. And it's more of a few comments than what I would call a presentation. First of all, thank you for letting me speak, and I must thank you for the quality of your chairmanship under the extreme the temptations that you're being subjected to, and I think you've remained remarkably calm and positive. I get a lot of, I'd just like to say, I get a lot of information about the vaccines, and I've had mine, my own, and everything's gone perfectly. But on the matter that we're discussing today, I've had experience in my family of 2 elderly ladies who died, but they died at home. And this is something which I think is the greatest strength, that is so much better, so much happier, so much. One of them, my old mum, was loving it in her garden. And I think for people in their end of life period, if they can be maintained at home, it is absolutely the thing that we should aim for. The comfort that they get from neighbours calling and help with the gardening and all that sort of thing is so much better than being institutionalized in a care home. I think that what I've seen is I'm a member for Soham South, and I'm sure Councillor Goldsack and will join me in this, and saying that the neighbourhood cares, which one of the prototypes was run in Soham, it was loved by the consumers. The people who operated it had a real involvement with the whole scheme, and it is something that needs to be learned, replicated, and expanded through the whole county. It really is something special, and the people involved with neighbourhood cares still need slaps on the back and saying well done. The amount of support we've had locally from volunteers connected with COVID has just shown that, you know, we are a caring people, we are a caring county, and we are a caring district in East Cambs, and I know all over the county and in fact the country. And we've got these whole cohort of people who want to help and do good, and this is something we should expand on and be facilitators and encourage community spirit and things like that. So I'm very keen that when COVID is gone, we don't just let all the good things of COVID disappear. The community spirit is something, and I know Councillor Criswell will expand on this, and his committee will make the best advantage of it. In the outcomes that you state that you want, you talk about adults wishing to remain living at home can easily access the support they need through a vibrant, diverse market of care and support in the community. Well, that's spot on. That's whoever wrote that got it dead right. And we talk again about more people want to fulfill their wish to remain living at home amongst their families, amongst their grandchildren, amongst their community, and being part of a community. And just because you're old doesn't mean to say you can't be part of a community. The demographics actually say, of course, that we're going to have more elderly people. And so this is what is an urgent matter now will become even more urgent. And so I urge you to support the recommendation, which is the committee is requested to approve. Well, I totally, as a backbencher, think this is absolutely the right thing. And as Joe has said, we can deliver in the long term home care can be delivered at a lower cost, well, it's absolutely a no-brainer that I believe you should vote for this, because you're going to get better care at lower cost and more humanity. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope it has some effect on your deliberations. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hunt. Very clear message to the committee there. Before I let you go, Councillor Hunt, can I ask members of the committee if they have any questions in relation to Councillor Hunt's statements? I see no hands, so thank you once again, Bill. Very clear presentation. We understand how much you are in support of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm now going to move back to the members of the committee and open this up to general debate. So if you wish to input, please raise your hand. Councillor Dupre.
We've had our attention drawn a moment ago to the outcomes of this paper, and the desired outcomes of this paper are that adults wishing to remain living at home can easily access the support they need through a vibrant, diverse market of care and support in the community, and that more people fulfil their wish to remain living at home for longer, enjoying a good quality of life and well-being. And I don't think anybody can disagree with those as desirable outcomes, provided that people who need care can obtain it, and that the care that they then obtain is of a good quality. What I'm confused, no, I'm not confused. What I want to see clearly delineated, when I saw this report initially, I asked for, and have yet to receive, a diagram, because we're increasingly given new phrases, new buzzwords, new ways of describing what we're doing. And I asked for, and as I say, I have yet to receive, and I really mean I would like, a diagram that shows the relationship between asset-based area concept, Buurtzorg, neighbourhood cares, adults positive challenge, place-based commissioning, think communities, and Cambridgeshire local. Now, I want a one-side piece of A4 that draws a diagram between those things, because I think we've reached the point where more words equal more confusion rather than more clarity. We've had all of these things thrown at us over a period of time. This is an important area of the council's operation. I agree, as I said, fully with the desirability of the outcomes of this paper, but I want to see a clear explanation of the relationships between all of those things that we're being told the council is doing. Thank you.
So could I ask Councillor Dupre, so you've mentioned a few things there, such as the Buurtzorg, which isn't operated by this council. That was an operating model in Holland that gave us some information to develop a neighbourhood cares. Neighbourhood cares moved on. We're now other operating models. So would it be helpful? It's not really a diagram, because some of it exists, some of it was on a path to get here, some of it is proposed in the future. Would it be more helpful to get a briefing note explaining all of those, because it can't be done in a diagram, because it's not literally an interlinked picture?
No, I don't think so. I think exactly what I'm asking for is a diagram, because a diagram will present clarity, and it's perfectly possible within a diagram to show Buurtzorg as something that was done overseas that provides a model which we might choose to adopt. You can use different shape boxes, coloured lines, dotted lines, whatever. I think we need a diagram to guide us through what is rapidly becoming a bit of a fog.
Okay, I'll ask officers if they can prepare a briefing, including some pictorial assistance for you, if that's possible. Okay. Can I move on then to Councillor Derek Giles?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, an interesting subject. I thoroughly agree with the previous speaker that there are so many aspects of care that there's more clarification needed. I also am very much aware, as I'm sure everybody else is, one of the good things that's come out of this COVID crisis is the amount of ground root support groups. We've got a very, very active one here in St Neots. It's being used, but it could be used a lot more if they were given the directions, and if members of the public who needed that help were also guided towards each other, if you see what I mean. very difficult for people to say, yes, I need help. Sometimes it's looked on as charity or whatever, and we've got to get away from that, that the communities should look after, or could look after themselves, especially the older and more vulnerable of our communities, and that it should be encouraged. So yeah, I would totally support this, but I like the previous speaker would like more clarity on what can be done. And I think that's probably what will happen. On a final point, again, perhaps I should declare an interest in this, as somebody's birthday is a couple of days away and well over me 3/4 of a century. But it's attendance allowance. It's a government scheme, and I'm sure most people here will know exactly what it means and such like. But there again, it's getting that message over to senior citizens, pensioners, etc., that government help is there up to £90 a week. And I frequently advertise this locally. I'm always amazed at the amount of people who didn't know anything about it and who are eligible for that attendance allowance. So I think that's a message which we as a council can push forward to in our advertising, if you like, of this scheme, which I hopefully will go ahead. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Giles. The next speaker I've got is Councillor Anna Bailey, who's helpfully the chair of the Adults Committee, so hopefully she can shine some light on this for us. Anna.
Thank you very much, Councillor Count, and happy birthday in 3 days' time to Councillor Giles, 3/4 of a century. Happy birthday, Derek. Hope you have a good day. Yeah, I agree with you about attendance allowance. We do need to get those messages out there, and that is absolutely something that the neighbourhood cares teams, when they were working in St Ives and Soham, were all over in terms of getting those sorts of messages out. And I think that's the value of being rooted in your community and knowing local people who can benefit. That is what this is all about. This is really about localism. I just in terms of the comments that Lorna raised, and in case anybody's watching this, I'm just going to try and help a little bit with all of those different labels, because the vast majority of them are labels that essentially we've used internally within the council to describe our own projects and programmes. They're not generally externally facing labels that we've put on things. I think people who sit on the Adults Committee and probably the Health Committee, and certainly those who sit on communities and partnerships, will be very familiar with all of those terms and what they mean and how we've used them. But Buurtzorg is a Dutch model that has some basic principles, and the council adopted those principles when it rolled out its pilot scheme, Neighbourhood Cares, and very much used those principles to great success, I have to say. And that is how those two pieces fit together. The Adults Positive Challenge programme is a very specific programme, quite focused on early intervention and prevention, reablement, technology, and was a specific programme to try to get upstream and support people earlier on in order to prevent and delay the onset of greater social care needs. So that is just a specific programme that's been running in the council, and those on the Adults Committee will be very, very well familiar. So if Councillor Dupre wants to maybe talk to some of the adult spokes member of the Liberal Democrats, Councillor Wilson, will know all about the Adults Positive Challenge programme. Place-based and asset-based, really one and the same thing. It's about looking at the assets based in our communities, which we've all talked about and we know are there, and actually came out through the Neighbourhood Cares programme, and then literally bubbled up overnight when COVID struck. And that is exactly what we are talking about. It's about getting plugged into those and helping that communication and facilitation on the ground at a very local level. Think communities, I think people are most councillors will be pretty well aware by now of what Think Communities is all about. And I do believe that Cambridgeshire Local, which hasn't yet been launched, is the potential new label, but I think that is still work in progress. So yeah, confusing array of terms, but I think the vast majority of those are internal labels that many councillors will be familiar with, not externally facing labels. But I think good point made that we need to, be careful about how we talk about this externally, so that people understand what it's all about. And what it's all about. I mean, we had a really good conversation about this when it came to the Adults Committee, and I wanted to emphasise that this is very much being seen as a rollout, not a pilot. It happens to be starting in one area. There was a lot of questions around why East Cambs had been chosen, and I hasten to add, with another hat on as leader of East Cambridgeshire District Council, it was absolutely not influenced by me as to where this would be rolled out. I think East Cambridgeshire officers spoke about the fact that East Cambridgeshire was a particularly good area to start because of its size, its mix of urban and rural. Was particularly thought to be good. We've got around, it is the smallest district. We've got around 500 local authority funded clients in East Cambridgeshire. And of course, it did have the very successful SOAM pilot of neighbourhood cares, which just sparked the most enormous amount of voluntary community goodwill that spread beyond SOAM, actually. And got a lot of people in East Cambs excited about this way of working. And I think what's so great about this is that it just, the public don't care about whether it's Cambridgeshire County Council, the Parish Council, the District Council. They just want to know that they can reliably get access, as Councillor Dupre said, to good quality services, easily accessible, and that they know that they're good services and they're going to get what they need. It received unanimous support at the Adults Committee, and I hope it will here again today. People know how passionate I am about this subject. I just know that the more locally you can coordinate and deliver prevention services and social care services, the better outcomes you get, the more flexible services you get, the more cost efficient services you get. We've proved all of that, and we help to stop people having to go into hospital and expensive later interventions. So I really hope everyone will support this, and I know it's something that the whole council understands and I think will get behind.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Lucy Netzinger.
Thank you. So it's very helpful to be coming after Anna, in that I would like to say how much I agree with her on the fact that people don't care who provides their services. They just want a decent service. And actually, while I do have huge reservations about this project, I will be supporting it, because I do actually think that the place-based commissioning that she's talking about is what's really important and really needed. My reservations are about that we have had and it's no blame on Joe, who's produced this paper, or on the officer team more widely. We have had so many different projects trying to achieve this, and it keeps being changed. We keep reformulating them. Actually, part of this is about that actually we need to invest more in our communities in order to make this happen. And that investment needs to not just be a little project there, a little bit here. It needs to be a much more strategic approach. So I'm reassured to hear that this is going to be rolled out. We desperately need it to be rolled out, but we need it to be consistently rolled out, not being changed every other week to a new programme. There are some things in here that concern me, and actually quite a lot of what's been said about the Adults Positive Challenge programme I also find concerning. The Adult Positive Challenge programme has been positive for some adults, but there are other adults and other people who have come into contact with that programme for whom it has been anything but positive, who have felt real pressure to change the way that they are being looked after, to change their care, and whose families have found that service and that change incredibly distressing. So there's some of the things in here about the area-based, asset-based area is about co-designing by service users, communities, third sector, healthcare, etc. if that is well done, then that can be fantastic. But if what we end up with is that actually service users don't feel they have any choice, service users feel that they are being pressurized into changes in their care and changes, and that the services that they need are not available, which is what is happening in some places, then that is not a good outcome. So what I want to say is that I do support this because I think it potentially is the right way forward. But it needs a consistent investment, and we must keep the choice and providing the best service that the service users want at the heart of what we're doing, rather than a constant pressure to reduce the resources that are being made available to people, which I think in many places is what's happening. I've had so many cases recently of people who have been receiving horrendous bills from the council for care because their care has changed and they were not aware of that and are not capable of dealing with the finances that they are now being asked to deal with. So I think we have to roll this out really carefully and make sure that it is not just about saving money, which is what some of the programmes have seemed to be about in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Netzer. Councillor Mark Goldsack.
Thank you, Steve. I just want to add a supporting point. 2 or 3 of the speakers, regardless of party, have mentioned the excellent side effect of what we've been going through with the pandemic in the rise of importance and rise on the great support in local communities and volunteer. I know Councillor Giles mentioned it and Councillor Netzinger too. I'd just like to add that off the back of the Neighbourhood Cares project, which was in my town of Soham, you're right, Lucy, when you say about constant investment is needed, but it's not all by us, in as much as the local Staplow Medical Centre, who, by the way, are the leading centre for vaccinations at this moment. My 82-year-old father's had both these injections, and they're already at the most vulnerable and over 70s, which is fantastic. But what they've done is they've appointed a social prescriber at their expense, and that's a direct result out of Neighbourhood Cares. And that social prescriber is plugged into the local and the surrounding community volunteer groups to get the best out of it, to point them towards things like the man shed that was developed, to point them towards things like the community day centres that were developed, etc., etc. And I think this is an extension of that, of exactly what we're doing there. I am wholeheartedly behind this, and I think it's a great move forward for helping people at the most vulnerable and end-of-life periods be where they want to be, surrounded by people that they know and are loved. And I think that's exactly what we should be supporting. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goldsack. I've got no other hands indicating to speak. I'd just like to reflect to Joe. Joe, excellent introduction, and it looks like we didn't have to call on you for your resources during this meeting, which is luckily for you a real good command of the subject from the chair, as you'd expect, and was able to answer everything fully here. I do hope that this gets the full approval of this council, so I'm going to move across to the decision-making element, the vote. I believe that we've got a general consensus, but I'm just going to check in favour of the recommendation. So if I haven't and anyone disagrees, could they please use the raised hand function now? I'm not seeing anything, in which case I'm going to declare this as approved unanimously. Thank you, Joe, for that excellent report and introduction. And I'm going to move on to the next item of business. Agenda item number 8, the General Purposes Committee Agenda Plan, Training Plan and Appointments outside bodies, groups and panels. Can I invite the Democratic Services Manager, Michelle Rowe, to introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing to add to the report this time.
Okay, the report is just for noting then, so I'll take that as unanimously noted. Is it, unless there are any questions on it, which I'm not expecting? There are none. In which case, I believe, I'm just checking my notes, I believe that is the end of the meeting. Thank you very much for attending, and we almost made it on time, but not quite. So thank you all, and a good afternoon.